Hey guys. Part 16 of What If Naruto Was Sealed and Woke Up After 2,000 Years. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 42, Between a Sun and a Base. Location, the Normandy. Morden, are you sure about this? Naruto asked from where he sat in the patient chair in the lab, watching the Solarian moving around him doing some last-minute things that were beyond the blonde. Sure? He repeated, sounding more amused at the question than actually curious. No, I'm not sure. Never sure. Scientist cannot be sure. Leads to overconfidence. Blinds person to chance of being wrong. That's comforting. I think the word you're looking for terrifying, Isabu told him. Don't make it worse, he silently replied. I'm already nervous as it is. He had been called into the lab by Morden because he had been told that the doctor might have found a way to get rid of the inhibitors in his body. Apparently, he took some of Grunt's blood and used it to synthesize the cure. Is he coming back with that needle? He asked as the Solarian finally turned to look at the blonde in the chair. Are you prepared? Morden asked him, holding a syringe in his three-fingered hand. As well as I'll ever be, he replied, already bracing himself for what would come next. That needle is really, really big, the Sanbai said as it came closer. He sounded really nervous. If he could sweat, he probably would. Since when is a Biju afraid of a needle? Asked Naruto. And stop talking. I need to stay focused here. But, stop talking. Injecting cure into subject's left shoulder, Morden said for his recording device. He plunged the needle into Naruto's shoulder. He wasn't gentle about it, choosing just to stab it in. The first thing the blonde felt was what he always felt when it came to getting injections, a thin, white-hot, piercing pain that left before he could really register it. As the needle was pulled from his shoulder and Morden stepped back, they both waited for the reaction. He first felt that his shoulder was rather warm and was growing warmer. It spread to the rest of his body at a measured speed. How do you feel? Asked the resident scientist, staring at him with inquisitive eyes. I feel The warmth suddenly left his shoulder, replacing it with a sudden coldness and following up with a severe cramp. Gah, holy fuck! He swore as he threw his head back against the chair. What? What is it? Cramp? He told Morden, cramp in my shoulder. Interesting. The doctor was just watching him and his vitals, waiting for something else to happen. Interest? He started to repeat it, only to clamp down on his mouth as the rest of his body got cold and became riddled with cramps. It felt like he was locked in place by the pain his body was throwing at him. He couldn't even scream out his pain because his jaw felt locked up. All he could do was watch Morden watch him, and the screen. He felt trapped again, just like with the tribe. He didn't know how long the cramps lasted, it almost felt too long. But when they did stop, the cold still remained in his body. He could move his body but felt something vile in his stomach. Ooh, he moaned, cramps gone. Able to move. How do you feel? Morden asked him. Not good. Whatever it was making his stomach turn, he could feel it beginning to rage and boil. He began dry heaving, an old practice for what came next. Quick, bucket, he said to the Solarian between dry heaves. Bucket? He repeated, a little confused. Bucket now! He got a bucket, bringing it to a spot on the ground in front of Naruto. Using what he could of strength before the outcome came, the blonde pushed himself out of the chair, falling to the ground. He barely registered the fact that his body was hurting now as he reached out for the bucket. He grabbed the edge and brought it closer. No sooner that he aimed his mouth, he began to throw up violently. Oh, that is nasty, Saiken commented as he and the other Biju watched him. The process was the usual process. His throat was on fire, he felt sicker for going through with it, and it was like he emptying out his entire life into that small, metal bucket. Just when he thought he was done, another wave hit him, and he threw up some more. He did it so many times that Morden had to go get another bucket, and then another when he was done with that one. Luckily, his stomach had emptied out by the time he was reached the halfway point with the third bucket. He pushed it away and just laid there on the ground, groaning and moaning loudly. Of course, there was one Biju in his mind that wasn't sympathetic in the slightest. Get up already, Kurama ordered him. You've been through worse than this. Just let me die, please, he silently begged. Even thinking was tiring right now. He just wanted to lie on the ground and die. That was how he felt at the moment. You're not dying, now get up. It did take him a few minutes to not feel like he was about to see the Shinigami anytime soon. But as his strength returned to him, he sat up and looked Morden straight in the eye. Never again, he declared. We're not doing that again, apologies. Did not expect human body to react so violently against Krogan cells. Had thought that same chakra would help ease the difference, the doctor said in his usual quick, matter-of-fact tone of voice. It's not my chakra, it's Grunt's. Chakra came from you before it was with Grunt, but it was still his. He felt a sharp pain in his side as he stood up, making him bite back a swear word. I think it's safe to say that Krogan chakra is different from human chakra. Interesting theory. We'll have to investigate later once solution to inhibitors is discovered and used. For now, please lay on table. Must get scan of current inhibitors. Alright, let me see if I can stand up. He did that right away but got dizzy in the process, and a little nauseous. He fell back down on his butt and stayed there, trying to make sure he didn't hurl again. Ooh, that wasn't a good idea. Perhaps try slower this time, Morden suggested. Yeah, that's a good idea. You should probably help me up too. He held out his hand for help. The doctor helped him get back on his feet and then onto the table. The coolness of the metal table actually felt soothing. This feels good, nice and cool. Hold still, please. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. I told you this was a bad idea, Sun told the blonde as the Solarian typed away on both his Omni tool and on the computer. You're going to give that speech to me now? He asked as he stared up at the ceiling, admiring its blandness at the moment. It's as good a time as any. What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking that I want more of my chakra back, and this seemed like a viable option when he suggested it to me. He was injecting with something he created from a Krogan. Did you really think that it would end any other way than you on the ground throwing up everywhere? He didn't know that going in, Gyuki pointed out. Come on, he should have expected something like it. He didn't know. Not knowing is no excuse, Koko said. If it was, a lot more people would be alive in the galaxy. Well, if it's any consolation, I don't think I'll be doing this kind of thing again, Naruto. Yeah, and I know why, Shikaka said with an amused grin. That was a hell of a puke you threw up. I think it might even be a record. If it hadn't happened and I still couldn't feel the vomit in my throat, I would disagree with you. But yeah, that's a part of it. The rest is just pain. Not good. Not good, Morden said, staring at his Omni 2. Naruto looked at the Solarian. He only turned his head, not trusting his body at the moment. What's not good, Morden? He asked. Don't tell me that you've caused the reverse and sealed up the open chakra points. No, nothing that drastic. Cure worked but only marginally. Outcome fell short by a very wide margin, he replied, looking up from his Omni tool. How marginally are we talking here? Cure was only able to attack 5 or 10 inhibitors before shutting down. Was expecting much higher number. Perhaps if modified and reapplied Cure would be much successful. He looked at the human on his table who was staring at him with wide eyes. Commander. No, not happening, he said instantly, suddenly finding his strength to sit up. That is not happening at all. Could be way to finally destroy all inhibitors, the Solarian said with a determined tone. It could also kill me. That dose was enough to make me cramp up and then empty my stomach twice over. Can you imagine what would happen if you applied a modified and possibly even stronger dose? He asked him, still worth trying. We'll not know if we do not try. He took a step to the table. I think he's about to strap you in, Gaki, Kurama commented idly. You might want to do something about that. He's got that gleam in his eye. I see the gleam. You don't need to tell me about the gleam, he silently replied. Morden, remember what you said about the inhibitors and how they can adapt, he told the doctor. If the rest of the inhibitors know about the cure, they've adapted to it already. Trying to give me more would be pointless. He stopped in place at those words. Fair point. Quite correct. Inhibitors would destroy modified cure. Annoyance. He sighed and turned back to the computer. Must think of new way to destroy inhibitors. Am I good to go then? Naruto asked, swinging his legs to dangle off the edge. Yes. Actually, wait. He swung around to look at the blonde again. Have theory. Wish to put it past you. He was a little intrigued. Nobody really put a theory past him. What's your theory? Theory about why stories and research all say that Biju could think and act. They were created from the chakra of the Jubi by the Rikudo Sannin, he replied, his intrigued look turning confused. The stories I've heard have said as much. Creation myths, often exaggerated. Yet often small piece of truth still resides in it. I theorize Biju were Chakra's own attempt to grow conscience, AI if you will. Did he just call us machines? Isabu asked, his one eye narrowing in suspicion. Naruto looked at the doctor incredulously. So, you're saying that you think that the Biju are just intelligent machines powered by chakra. From what scant research of chakra shows, quite unlike Ezo. If Ezo is stone, then chakra would be like single-cell organism. That makes absolutely no sense, he said after a second's pause. How can you compare chakra to an organism and Ezo to a stone? Bring enough stones together, can make a wall, a well, or a house. Same process with organisms, Morden told him in his usual speedy delivery. You get enough and you grow a conscience? Happened to you and me, why not chakra? Would explain why stories tell about mindless destruction. Conscience was still growing that time. What about the Jubi? How do you explain that? Or the Rikudo Sinin? He asked Morden. He could feel that his tenants were beginning to feel a little more than irritated at the way the conversation was going. Part of creation myth. Have to explain beginnings of Biju. Most likely pieces of fiction, not real. What? All 9 Biju roared as one, echoing around in the blonde's mind like a cannon in a glass hall. What did he just say? Kurama shouted. Did he just call the old man a myth? Shikaku demanded, sounding just as angry as the fox. They were united in this, something that had to be taken note of. That's it. He dies. Sun declared. Naruto, kill him. Komiai ordered. I can't do that, he protested. Did you not hear what he said? Yes, I did. He had heard it quite well. His ears were still working fine. But I can't just kill him. Yes, you can. Kurama growled. Kurama, if I kill him, how am I going to get the rest of the inhibitors off? That was why they brought him on board in the first place. Don't care, kill him. Now, just hold your tails, would ya? I'm not going to kill this guy. Come on. How many times have you guys heard that the Rikudo Sinin didn't exist? He had met a number of people who believed that to be the case, and he knew that they had too. The growls and anger subsided, but not by much. They were still angry. Fine, then bring him in here, Isabu told him. That order made him pause and think about it. I don't know if I can do that with the number of inhibitors I have. Try. And if I get hit by the pain because I tried? Try. The fox repeated the turtle's order in the exact same tone of voice. Alright, hold on. I'm going to try and ease him into this. Fuck easing. Drag his ass in here now. Matatabi shouted at him. With her temper running like that, it was hard to remember that she was the one who tried to play peacemaker among the 9 of them. Morden, he said to the Solarian. Yes? He replied, looking back at the shinobi still sitting on the table. I'm going to try something and I'm going to need your participation for this. Now whatever you do, don't panic. Just remember to breathe and keep calm. He reached out, placed his hand on the doctor's head with a firm but gentle grip. Why reminder to stay calm and breathe? And what is with hand? He asked. There was no real good way to explain it to a scientist, especially one who writ the Biju off as A.I.S for chakra, so he went with the blunt answer. My tenants would like to have a word. He had a vague idea of what he was doing, having his own experience to work with and watching Ino and Liara do their versions. But seeing was not doing, and his own experience didn't really extend to third parties. In fact, this would be the first time. Liara didn't count since she mind melded. Well, he had to try. He reached for his chakra and sent it into the Solarian. The first thing Morden felt was a funny feeling around his brain. The second was a sharp tugging coming from his feet. Suddenly his breath was knocked out of him, and he went blind. He felt like someone was dragging him away quickly from the lab. The feeling stopped, and he found something lying in a body of some king of liquid. Hey, asshole, open your eyes and get up, a loud voice demanded. He did open his eyes and saw 9 animals of varying creatures and color staring down at him angrily. The only word that came out of his mouth at the sight was "Oh." I said get up, the red gorilla said again with a growl, pounding his hands into the ground for effect. That effect turned out to be the liquid splashing, getting him wet front to back. You might want to do as Sun says, Morden, Naruto said, appearing by his head. You need a hand? He extended the aforementioned hand. Too shocked to stand up by himself, he took that hand and got up. Commander? How, where? He tried asking, unable to form complete sentences. Welcome to my mind, Morden, the blonde said simply. These are the tenants, the Biju. He waved his hand widely so he could gesture at them all. They'd like to have a word with you about what you said. First off, do we look like we're fucking machines to you, huh? The large turtle demanded. Does it look like we've got mechanical pieces of any kind on our bodies? That would be Isabu. Secondly, don't you dare even think about dismissing the old man as a myth. You do that again and I will drown you in sand, you got that? Screamed the brown tanuki. Not if I get him in my slime first. The slug disagreed. That's Shikaku and Saiken, the commander introduced them. You don't know what you're talking about, so don't assume that you know everything just from some studies, the blue cat said to him in a dangerous hiss. You sound stupid and insulting, Matatabi, the blonde said shortly. Were you there when we were born? Asked the bug. Were you there when we grew up? Asked the white horse-like creature. He would have called it a horse outright if it wasn't for the head. That was nothing like any horse head he had seen before. You sure as hell as weren't. The bull with tentacles, he wasn't aware of such a creature's existence until now, having always assumed descriptions were fanciful, yelled at him. Komiai, Koko, and Gyuki, Naruto rattled off. And last but definitely not least, Morden could only stare at the giant fox right in front of him. His lips were born in a snarl and the growling emitting from his throat rumbled all around him. Watch your step and your tongue, little lizard. We don't tolerate someone dismissing our birth and our father as mere myths. The next time you make that mistake, you will not be able to live long enough to regret it. Am I understood? Karama, the human beside him, finished. He didn't say anything, still too stunned at seeing all 9 of the tailed beasts looming over him very angrily. I said, am I understood? The QB roared. Its force was loud and big enough to force him several steps back. If he hadn't been able to keep his balance, he wouldn't have fallen back down. No, he would have been sent flying through the air. Yes, I understand, he said shakily. Good. Get him out of here, Gaki. Easy does it, Morden, Naruto said to him, coming up to his side again. Just breathe. His hand touched his shoulder and suddenly, Morden found himself back in the lab again. He looked around quickly, making sure that he was where he thought he was. When he knew that he was in the lab aboard the Normandy, he released the breath he had been unintentionally holding in. He looked at Naruto, who was still sitting on the table. He tried asking the question, but he found that he couldn't. He was overwhelmed by it all, and for a scientist like him, that was saying something. Yeah, that happened, the shinobi answered. You really ticked them off with your theory. He took a deep breath to steady himself, repeating the process 5 times. When he was done, he was calm once more. Have taken notice. We'll discard chakra AI theory. Next time, just ask me and I will relay the question. Isn't that what the scientists do? Ask the original source if they have the chance? The doctor nodded. Yes. Foolish of me not to ask. We'll do so next time. Actually, would like to talk. Naruto stopped himself from walking out the door when he heard that. Talk about what? He asked. He tore his eyes away from the blonde and went to go look out the window into space. Talked about work earlier. Time with Special Tasks Group. Studying Genophage. Wasn't entirely honest. When he said that, there was a slight tremble to his voice. Lie of omission. Also other kinds. Need to clean the air. Mission too important to keep secrets. He paused for a moment. Work on Genophage was more than just study. A chill ran down across Naruto's skin. He had a feeling that whatever was going to be said next was not going to be pleasant. But Morden was the one who spoke. The conversation had to be finished. How much more? He asked. Wasn't lying completely. Initially just did recon. But uncovered data. Troubling. He turned away from the window to look at the shinobi proper when he delivered the news. Krogan population was increasing at faster rate than expected. Krogan were adapting to Genophage. Overcoming disease. That sounded like good news to him. He knew that Rex had felt his race was doomed because of that disease. But still, there were doubts in his head about it. Perhaps they just had less mercs, leaving more Krogan, he suggested. Please, Commander. Social, environmental concerns accounted for. Not an undergraduate. He actually sounded mildly offended. Population spike caused by adaptation to Genophage. No other possibility. So, are you saying that Krogan scientists developed something to help them? Krogan scientist? He asked with actual scorn and derision. Ha! Never met Krogan scientist worthy of term. No. Natural evolution. Krogan physiology incredible durable. Organ redundancy, backup systems, cellular regeneration. Genophage like any other natural hazard. Krogan evolved past it. Okay, but this is a good thing, right? If the Krogan are evolving and adapting to the Genophage, they have a chance to rebuild what they had. It sounded like a good thing to him, but Morden disagreed harshly at that. Naive viewport. Krogan too dangerous to allow unchecked birth rate. Look at Krogan rebellions, he snapped at the human. He knew that tone of voice. It was the voice someone used when they were defending their own actions. Morden, what did you do? He asked suspiciously, folding his arms against his chest. Personally led a science team. Geneticists, chemists, sociologists, mathematicians. Created a new version of Genophage. Released it on Tuchanka, other Krogan-centric areas. Re-established Krogan population. He didn't know what to say to that at first. The words came quickly enough. You didn't think to try any other kind of options? Yes, the doctor replied, walking around as he spoke. Hundreds. Thousands. Modified Genophage offered best outcome. Stabilized population. Avoid publicity that could incite Krogan anger. Averted possible genocide or devastating war. Best solution for Krogan and Galaxy. The best solution, avoiding anger and averting genocide? He repeated incredulously. That's your defense? Morden, the Krogan are already angry. They're angry because they've been neutered and see themselves as a lost cause. Then this came along, and your group quashes it with what seems barely a thought to it. Why didn't you just save them the trouble and shoot them en masse? Not a war criminal. Not a murderer. Genocide unnecessary, he protested. Krogan as a whole violent, aggressive. Still have outliers. Worth saving. Genophage modification protected Galaxy, allowed Krogan chance to survive. Everyone wins. Good for us, good for them. The shinobi stood there, controlling his breathing before he did anything that he would regret later. But he definitely had something to say. Tell me something, Morden. Are all Solarians hypocrites, or is it just the ones who deal with the Krogan? Beg pardon? He looked a little surprised to hear such words. You heard me. I said hypocrite. You call the Krogan violent and aggressive, but your race was the one who uplifted them because of that very same thing. Then when they stopped listening to what you were telling them, you started complaining and wondering loudly why they were doing this. Then you decide to neuter them to make them stop. Your people should have programmed the Genophage to kill them outright. He shook his head rapidly at that. No, genocide unnecessary. Solarians at time did not wish to kill, only contain. No need or wish to kill Krogan. You're already killing them, Morden. You're just killing them slowly. Have you ever stopped and actually thought about what the Genophage is doing to the Krogan? Know what Genophage does. Design modification. I'm not talking about what does to their bodies. He shouted, stopping the Solarian before he could start. I'm talking about what it's done to their spirits. Spirits? He repeated quizzically, twitching his head in confusion. Yes, spirits. You say that genocide was never an option. But you're either too blind or unwilling to see that you've already inflicted it on them. The Genophage is driving them to extinction, but instead of a swift end, it's drawing the process out, making them feel every bit of it. Do you have any idea how many female Krogan there are left? The number is lower than the males. Why do you think that there are so many Krogan out in the galaxy as mercs? They've given up on their own race and decided to say fuck it. They would rather go out fight to fulfill that desire inside of them because they think they have no other option. And the Solarians stand there, saying the Genophage was done for the good of Galaxy. He scoffed at that. You didn't find a solution to stop the Krogan. You just placed them in long-term torture. Morden stood there in silence, his eyes unblinking. He did not say a word for a long minute, and it seemed to stretch out. Possible, he finally said. But too late to do anything about it now. Genophage already modified and delivered. You took the one hope they had and turned it into a weapon against them. Aware. Wanted to tell you. Show you I can make hard choices. Level of threat with tribe, may have to face hard choices. Hope you can prove yourself at them. That remark hardened his head into a scowl. Don't talk to me about hard choices, Morden. I made plenty of those during the war. He had to make judgment calls or participate in them, and they were never easy. He stopped himself from going into those memories again or getting angry, taking another deep breath. Thank you for telling me about what you did, Morden. The Solarian had the decency to be upfront about it. Is there anything else? No, he said. He took that as his permission to leave. In the corridor, he stopped and punched the wall. If he was using his chakra at full strength, he would have punched through it. Instead, he got a fresh wave of pain through the arm. It flowed through and then up his body, telling him what he had just done. You good? Asked Kurama. Are you? He asked back. I'm fine, I cooled off. What about the rest of you? I'm good, Sun announced. Irritated but calm now, Isaba muttered. Still a little pissed, but I can manage, Saiken remarked, sounding a little annoyed. I'm alright, Gyuki told the blonde. Annoyed but I'll fly it off, Komiai declared. Now what about you? Asked Kurama again. Well, my hand is hurting like you wouldn't believe. I can believe it since that wasn't your first time hitting a wall with your fist. Now, are you good or not? Yeah, I'm good. I'm just pissed at the hypocrisy I seem to keep finding in the galaxy. The Council wants everyone to follow their lead, and yet, they look down their noses or beaks or whatever at those who aren't worthy to be an actual Council race. They uplift the people to fight for them and then neuter them because they were getting out of hand before leaving them high and dry. If Madara or, for the love of Kami, I can't believe I'm about to say this, Obito reappeared and tried to destroy everything, I would be sorely tempted just to let them. I'm sorry, would you like to repeat yourself? I think you just said something stupid, the fox growled warningly. If you're willing to condone something those bastard Uchihas would do, you and I are going to have a severe problem, Gaki. Maybe you should be a part of the Akatsuki. You've got the temperament for it, it seems. Watch it, furball, he replied just as warningly. I said sorely tempted, not that I would do it. These people might be hypocritical pains in the ass, but they still live in this universe. They named me a specter. That makes me one of their defenders, and you know me and my word. Yeah, you never go back on them. Like I haven't heard that 1, 3, or 5 billion times already, he muttered. You know, technically speaking, I don't think you're a specter anymore, Isabu added in. What? What the hell makes you think that? The blonde asked the turtle. Haven't you been dead to the galaxy for 2 years? I think the Council would take away your specter status after that long without proof of you living. How about we just go on the assumption that I'm still a specter until told otherwise? Naruto suggested, just to stop the arguing before it got ahead. Already his hand was feeling less painful. That works, Kurama agreed. Sometimes he got tired of the arguing and the weird conversations too, sometimes. Awooga, oh for Kami's sake! Swore the blonde as the alarm went off over his head. EDI, patch me through to Joker. Patching you through now, Commander Uzumaki, EDI replied. It didn't take long for the line to connect. Yeah, you need something, Commander? Joker asked him, his voice showing he was already busy. What's going on, Joker? Oh, not much, he answered. That one ship is back. Shit. I'm making my way to the elevator now. He was already starting down the corridor. Technically, he could double back and go through the lab, but he really didn't want another face-to-face with Morden at the moment. No need to do that. What are you talking about, Joker? I'm pretty sure there's a need here if we want to not get captured. You know, contrary to popular belief, one doesn't have to be in full immersion to fly the ship. And I was flying while you taking your little nap through the cosmos. He knew that he was supposed to be insulted by that little phrase, but the man did have a point. The first rule of the Normandy was to only judge Joker by his hands and mind. The second rule was taking Joker out of his chair at own risk. It was like the man had a magnet on his back that connected him to it. At least that was the scuttlebutt was saying. Alright, that's fair, he conceded. Thank you. Besides, we should be fine. Care to explain? 2 things. The first is that the ship is on the other end of the system. The second is that we're currently cloaked, and it can't find us. I can jump out of here and swing back around to the mass relay to get clear before it even notices. Do you mind if I do that, or would you rather I get your permission first? Just do it, Joker. And watch the sarcasm. You're liable to hurt someone with it. He stopped walking since he wasn't needed on the command deck. He stayed in place from an old habit from a lifetime of being a shinobi, trying to stay put if you risk being captured. Like you haven't? Shikaka asked him. He wasn't always this sarcastic, Kurama told him. He used to be dense instead. Oh yeah, I remember that. I had my moments that proved I wasn't dense. You know, Naruto chimed in, trying to defend himself. Few as they were and far in between too, the fox remarked drily. He chose not to argue back that point, otherwise he would end up in the argument that he was trying so hard to avoid. He couldn't hear anything about the battle. Awooga, except that damn siren going off over his head. They really need to get that change. He mentally screamed. You've said that already, Shikaka told him. Annoying siren aside, can we talk about something a little more serious? Koko asked them all. Like what? The Ichibi asked back. What are we going to do in the future when it comes to crunch time? Crunch time? Repeated Isabu. What will we do when we finally go up against the actual tribe and take them down? What will we do when we're done with the Akatsuki? That kind of thing, he explained. What's with this wee business? Naruto asked him. I'm the one who's doing all of that. You guys are more like the color commentary that just won't leave. I prefer to think of it as giving emotional support, Gyuki said in slight defense. You mean confusing and chaotic support, Shikaku amended with a grin. The Hachibi gave him a look that was both a glare and a frown. He only laughed in response. He'd been on the receiving end of that one too many for it to do anything anymore. I rest my case, Naruto said simply. Don't rest it just yet, Koko told him. I wasn't done with what I was talking about. Please, everyone, this is a serious issue. one that we should definitely focus on. What's going to happen once we get through the tribe and the Akatsuki? There's a good chance that we won't beat the former, and the latter might not let us go so easily. Have you forgotten whose body you're riding in? Kurama asked the Gobi. I haven't forgotten, Kurama, he retorted. But we are talking the organization that held Naruto for 2 years while sealing his chakra, which, I would like to remind you, still hasn't been fully unsealed. And we don't have a good history with the latter organization, new incarnation or not. Awuga, 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 ga. It's really hard to even think with that damn siren wailing. Komi shouted, buzzing his wings in distress. Thank you? Naruto said in agreement. Guys, please stay on topic, Koko said to them both. It's hard with that thing starting to grate on the ears, Koko, Saiken told him. I mean, look at me. I'm practically vibrating from the noise. Awuga, awoog. The siren went dead and they all paused, waiting for it to come back on. Those 5 seconds of silence felt much longer than they should. One said a word as they waited for something, anything to happen. All right, everyone, Joker announced over the intercom. We've lost the ship. I repeat, we've lost the tribe ship. Everyone can relax and unclench. He has such a nice way of saying things, doesn't he? Shikaka asked as the intercom went dead. The conference room door opened and Jacob walked out. Oh good, he said when he saw Naruto. I was about to come looking for you, Commander. You need something, Jacob? I might, sir. Is it possible to borrow a minute of your time? He asked the blonde. Sure. The man disappeared back through the door. Naruto followed him. They walked to the table, going to opposite sides so they could face one another. What's on your mind? I've been taking the time to look through the information we got from that tribe ship, seeing if there was anything that jumped out, he started. Was there? Nothing at first, he replied. It all seemed the typical information for locations of bases and ships, what they were doing there and how long they're there for. But then... He fell silent, almost like he was hesitating. But then... Naruto repeated, silently commanding him to continue. If he wanted something from him, he was going to have to say it. The shinobi might be blonde, but he wasn't a mind reader. Last night as I was combing through the information, I came across one planet-side base in particular. And then, I got pinged by a ghost. Family, he answered. Family? Yeah, family, he said with a nod. My father was first officer on a ship that went missing 10 years ago. I had not talked to him 3 years prior. Oh geez, Naruto thought with a tiny wince he hoped he hadn't seen. That's a long time. There was some good from it. He knew the man at least. His ship, the Hugo Grenzbank, sent an SOS last week, Jacob continued, reporting a crash and a request for rescue. Just like that, out of the black. He paused for a second, his lips moving but no words coming out of his mouth. Finally, he sighed and said, I'm not convinced it isn't just some automatic distress signal ticking over. It's been too long. I might lack some experience here, he said. But it isn't supposed to be a good thing to discover that your dad is still alive? Or did you not have good memories of him? He leaned back a little and shrugged his shoulders in reply. He wasn't around enough for me to have bad memories. It's an old, well-healed wound. But if he's alive and actually needs help... He left it hanging, either not wanting to say it or unsure how to say it. Hold on, tell me how this is important to us right now. How is finding a distress signal from your father related to us getting back at the tribe? He reached down and started typing away at a console. The middle of the table lit up and showed a planet hanging in the air. It didn't show the actual coloring of the planet, but that was because of the orange lighting. This is the planet, 2175 AI, he explained. It's in the Alpha Draconis system, which is in the Rosetta Nebula. It's way out of the way for the usual traveler, and according to the information we found, it is home to a major tribe base, one that dealt primarily in chakra blockage. You're thinking that it might have something on the inhibitors. He nodded. Yes. According to the information, the base was shut down 2 years ago, barely a couple of months after the Normandy was ambushed. It would be enough time to finish contributing to the inhibitors if they hadn't made them themselves. Once their job was done, they could leave. All right, I'm sold. How far away is the planet? About a 2-day trip, he answered. In the opposite direction. There was a paused moment in the conference room before Naruto looked up at the ceiling and said, EDI, Joker, now. He didn't get a reply from the AI, but he did get one from the pilot. Somebody call? Joker asked. Joker, that mass relay we used, was that the only one in that system? There was another one, but that was in a different system close by. He looked over at Jacob, who simply nodded in acknowledgement. You're going to have to hang a U-turn and head back to that other mass relay. Why? his pilot asked, sounding a little confused. We've got a place to head towards and it's in the opposite direction. So you're going to have to turn around, if that's possible in mid-jump. He didn't know if it was. He was going on the assumption that they could. Not in mid-jump, no, he said. But I can use it again to head back once we're through to the other side. Where are we going anyway? We are going to planet 2175 AI of the Alpha Draconis system in the Rosetta Nebula, EDI said, joining the conversation. AI? Yelped Joker in surprise. Hey, has anyone ever told you it's rude to eavesdrop on a conversation? He demanded once he could. I was not eavesdropping, Mr. Moreau. I was waiting for a moment in the conversation where I would be able to give any help that was required of me. As such, I felt that now was such a moment. Yeah, that's called eavesdropping, Mr. Moreau. People, stay on topic here, Naruto said. His sentence made them both fall quiet. Now, Joker, can you get us there? Yeah, of course I can. The tricky part will be sneaking past the tribe's ship again, and since I already did that once, the second time should be just fine. Mr. Moreau, I must remind you that the tribe's ship entered system actively looking for the Normandy. It is very likely they will have some kind of equipment that detects incoming ships. All ships have that. It's called the radar, he said with the deepest amount of sarcasm he could pour into his voice. We'll be fine. Don't judge my flying skills. I hope that wasn't directed at me. I've never once doubted you, Joker, Naruto said to him. Do what you gotta do to get us there. Roger that, Commander, he said in reply. I would like to make a suggestion to our travel route, EDI said before the intercom could go dead. Oh boy, here we go. Mr. Moreau, please listen to the suggestion before you go ahead with your usual amount of complaints and sarcasm. Did she just use sarcasm? The shinobi thought. He wasn't really expecting an answer. It was just the novel concept of a machine learning sarcasm, at least for him. But now wasn't the time to ponder that. They had to stay on topic. What do you have to say, EDI? You're asking it? Joker asked in protest. Yes, and I think it's safe to say that it is rather a she. I do not have a gender, Commander Uzumaki, EDI said in reply. I am. Save it. It's probably technobabble that I'm not going to understand either way. That's you with everything. We can tell, especially if you've got that stupid look on your face, Kurama said with a smirk. The rest of the Bijus started sniggering at that. Yeah, laugh it up, he told them all. EDI, the point is you've got a lady's voice, so until you've got a body that says otherwise, you're a lady. Very well, I will take this information and utilize it, she replied. Okay then, what do you have for us? The system we are currently heading towards has 2 additional mass relays in the same cluster. Either one of them could get us to the intended target. It will allow us to reach the destination without provoking the tribe's ship currently hunting us. The problem with that is it will take us an added 3 days to the 2 to get there, Joker said. That falls in the acceptable amount of time delay, Mr. Moreau. Not to me, it isn't. It'll be quicker and less of a pain for everyone if we just double back through the mass relay to the previous system and fly towards the other relay, which will put us at risk of being caught and attacked by the enemy ship, she replied. It's called making sure we don't get caught before we hit the relay. Mr. Moreau, the odds of that happening are. Never tell me the odds, he said with a firm tone in his voice. That just gives me an incentive to do it. So do it, Joker, Naruto ordered. Commander, EDI tried to say. We're on a time crunch here, EDI. We don't know if the tribe has gotten everything out of that location. The quicker we get there, the more of a chance we'll have to grab the information we need. Joker, pull a U-turn as soon as you can. Aye, Commander, his pilot acknowledged. Thank you, Commander, Jacob said, bowing his head. Get that head up, Jacob. You're making me feel embarrassed, he told the man, his hand already reaching up to scratch the back of his head. Gaki, you're doing it again, Kurama said instantly. He froze, his hand stopping half away. Sorry, put the hand down. Yeah, I know the drill. If you knew the drill, you wouldn't do it. It's a habit, I know. I've been trying to break it. That's why I got you to remind me. Commander, there is something else I would to add, Jacob said to him. If he took notice of the hand, he didn't say about it. I would like to note that it's not normal procedure for distress calls to be routed through the Normandy. This was passed to my personal log through Akatsuki filters. That was something to take notice of, and he forgot about his hand. You got any ideas on who it might be? I doubt the elusive man would let a direct operation stay cold this long, he replied as he turned off the console. If there's a link, it's probably about money. The Akatsuki needs diverse holdings to fund projects like, well, you. He hesitated at the end and his voice was a little unsure. I'm not offended, Naruto told him. Just keep going. Whoever sent this my way covered their tracks. Someone could be fishing for favors. Or thought it would get under my skin. Who knows with that bunch? he asked. The blonde decided not to remark on the fact that, to him, he was one of that bunch. He also didn't want to comment, or even ask about the relationship between him and his father. That was personal and none of his business. We'll get there and see if your dad is still alive, I promise. Thank you, Commander. I don't expect more than dusty old bones, but it'll be good to close the record. Naruto gave him a nod of acknowledgement and turned to the door. He almost left when Jacob spoke again. Commander, could I trouble you for one last question? He turned around again. Sure. What's up? The man was hesitant and embarrassed. It showed in how much he avoiding eye contact. But he still spoke. One of the few things I learned from my father was about my ancestry and to take pride in it. Okay. He was still waiting for the actual question. He said that our ancestor fought alongside you in the 4th Shinobi World War. I served with a lot of people from Kumogakure. Could you be a little more detailed? Surprise was evident on his face at his question. How did you know he was from Kumo? He shrugged. Every shinobi that had black skin was from Kumo during the war. I'm guessing that it's a little different now. Well, yes. About 40 years after the war, my family migrated to the frontier. But we came originally from Kumo and still served as shinobi or in the frontier military. Really? He asked. Yes. It happened a lot, especially after the Long War. You can find different colored skins in every country on Earth. Okay, but back to the point, you say that I served alongside your ancestor? He repeated, now becoming curious about the question. Yes, both of them, Jacob told him. Both? He nodded. They were brothers. A suspicion took place in his mind and instantly bloomed. He had a feeling about who the ancestor was and just had to ask. Are you saying that you're descended from the Yondaime Reikage? He asked the man, looking right at him. He knew that B had died before he became a parent, so it had to be a, yes I am. And your family migrated to the frontier? As long as he had known, and from what little B taught him about the village itself, the Reikage was the only kage that had been heredity. That ancestor was a younger son who wanted to be different, Jacob explained. He quickly joined the Marines when given the offer. Technically speaking, we're too far spaced to actually be considered a part of the main family. At least I think that's the situation, he amended. Huh. It was the only thing he could think to say, until he continued with, you look nothing like the guy. Real smooth, Gaki, Kurama commented. Shut up. Jacob smiled a little. 2,000 years will do that to a man. He laughed a little. That's fair. So, you want to know about A? I'll be honest, the best description I've got for him would be that he was like a raging bull in a tea shop. More like a raging bear, Matatabi commented. Definitely bear, Gyuki agreed. No, actually I wanted to know what his brother was like, Jacob told Naruto, his voice dropping as he spoke. The blonde stood there silently, registering what he had just heard. You want to know about B, he finally said. In the back of his head, he could hear Gyuki fall silent too. You did know him. Yeah, I did. He could almost see B standing right beside him, rapping about how it was cool that his brother had a child and that child had a child, trying to go as far as he could, until his brother came in and drop-kicked him into the ground. His lips twitched into a ghost of a smile at the idea of it. Cammy, he missed that man right now. Can you tell me about him? That ghost smile disappeared when he heard that question. Didn't the history books already cover him? Yes, but you knew him. That's a difference I'd want to use. He could understand that, having done it himself back before the war. Well, the first thing one noticed about Killer B was that he was a weirdo. Jacob's face blanched, and then became confused. A weirdo? He repeated, like he hadn't heard correctly and wanted to be sure. The first time I met him, he was in Biju mode and he was attacking the squid that was attacking the boat I was on. The first words that came out of his mouth was a rap that I had no idea how to make out. It seemed like that was the only way he could actually speak, and when I tried to do the same thing the first time around, I accidentally ended up insulting him. Can you imagine what it's like to insult the guy you want to learn from? He shook his head. Not really, no. He had been one of those soldiers who, while they hated their drill instructors only because they were supposed to be hated, always managed to keep his opinions about people to himself. Well, luckily for me the air was managed to be cleared easily and he started teaching me. That's when I learned that he might have sounded weird when he spoke, but he knew his stuff and was determined that I figure it out too. Once I did and I got past that initial barrier of his, he turned out to be a good guy to be around. He smiled as he talked about the man. It was nostalgic. Cammy, I miss the man. For a moment, he wondered what B would say if he could actually see the future as it was now. I think he would enjoy the Asari matrons and matriarchs above all, Gyuki told him, feeling just as nostalgic about remembering his previous host. Yeah, he would, he agreed. He had learned during the war that B was a little like Jiraiya in the sense of being a lover of ladies. The difference was that he preferred middle-aged women as opposed to the beauties Naruto had seen the Erosenin chase after. Commander? Said Jacob, getting his attention back. Sorry, did you want to know about him? He asked. No, that's good for now, thank you. The blonde walked out without another word to him. He didn't see anything wrong with that, turning back to the table and work. They might be on their way to get his father, but there was still work to do here. Hey, Joker, Naruto said as he walked into the cockpit. It looked the same as the original Normandy's cockpit, but probably a little wider in the spacing. EDI's holographic orb, for lack of a better word, stood next to the piloting chair. His pilot swerved around in his chair and gave him a hairy eyeball. It took you this long to come up and say hi? I'm hurt, Commander, he said. Really, I am. The shinobi was taken a little aback by the eyeball and the tone. Sorry? He offered. Things have been a little hectic since we got on board. Is that the excuse you're going with? I thought we were friends. We are, Joker. We are. So could you stop trying to guilt-trip me for your amusement? He asked. Damn, you figure it out, Joker remarked. He didn't sound particularly disappointed by it. There was even a small smile on his lips. You wouldn't be Joker if you didn't do stuff like this. He almost fell for it, but saw through it right when his pilot asked the part about the excuse. So, how are things going up here? That smile got wider. It's my baby, better than new. It fits me like a glove. Then he did a little wiggle in the chair. And leather seats. Military may set the hardware standard, but on a first-gen frigate they could care less if the chairs breathe. Civilian sector comfort by design, he declared. The reproduction is not intended to be perfect, Mr. Moreau, EDI spoke up, her lines moving as the voice spoke. Seamless improvements were made. The happy look on Joker's face morphed into a half-frown, half-scowl. And there's the downside. I liked the Normandy when she was beautiful and quiet. Now she's got this thing I don't want to talk about. It's like ship cancer. I think everyone on the ship knows about that now, Naruto told him. Besides, I know the ship is great and all. But the Akatsuki still designed it. They might have done something. Maybe you're right, he conceded before throwing a look at the sphere to his right. I guess it's hard to argue when they install an AI to spy on us. Ida didn't say anything in response. We're staying though, right? I mean, this seat is real leather. The blonde laughed, and shook his head at the remark. You're enjoying it here, aren't you? Leather, he repeated, knocking the arm of his chair with a knuckle, making a dull hollow sound that couldn't really echo. He didn't see what it was all about. One kind of chair was as good as the next to him. But then again, he never really could stay in a chair for long. So, how's the ship been treating you? So far, so good, he answered. But outside of fighting ship to ship, I'd really like a chance to put the Normandy through her paces. I just have to trim up the drive output, and it'll be like we never lost her. Safety standards advise against manipulating drive settings while engines are powered and in use, Mr. Moreau, EDI told him practically as soon as he was done talking. He gave the orb another dirty look before looking at Naruto. Commander, can we shut this thing off? I don't need it in my day-to-day. You've been doing fine so far, the shinobi pointed out to him. Just try to work with it. Yeah, reasoning with the intercom is not my strong point, he muttered just loud enough to be heard with a scowl on his face. You don't reason with the intercom. You use it to argue with her where I can hear it. It's a machine, sir, not a woman. I would notice if a woman was talking to me. We already established that she's a woman, Joker. There's no point arguing about it, Naruto told his pilot. Fine, but I still don't like it, he replied, still scowling. Sorry to pop your comfort bubble. No, you're not. You're right, I'm not. There was no heat in the words as they were spoken. Rather, they just shared a chuckle about it. They could have been angry with each other, but what would have been the point? EDI was still on the ship. Hey Joker, you ever think about the old crew and the old ship? Naruto asked him. He nodded. Yeah, I do, but I don't let it blind me. Blind you? He repeated, confused. What does that even mean? I know they seem like the good old days now, but come on. It was hell on earth at the time. Geth, Saren, Sovereign, he listed off what they went through. And then we got dumped. We're stuck in a weird place, sure, but back then it wasn't all sunshine and bunnies. Trust me, Joker. That time is not what I consider the good old days. To me, the good old days would have been back before the war, when I was a fresh genin. All I had in my head was to be Hokage, beat Sasuke at virtually everything, and make Sakura fall in love with me. Yeah, you were an idiot back then, Kurama said, though not with a small bit of fondness in his voice. You won't hear me complain. He could cop to that fact. Good, because we both know that I would have beaten you in that argument. Little Gen and Naruto, Joker said with an amused look on his face. His shoulders started shaking from barely contained laughter. You must have looked so cute. I wouldn't know about cute. He turned thoughtful as he went over the descriptive adjectives. Excitable might be a better word. Pig-headed might be another. Loud is certainly one. I thought that the world I was in back then was tough and hard, that nothing could be more punishing than what I was going through. And now? He asked. I would gladly take another mission to hunt down the daimyo's wife's cat. Hell, he actually missed that damn flea bag. Kurama snapped his head up at that. No. Absolutely not. I refuse to let that happen, the fox declared. If you actually want to chase down that cat again, I will force you into an insane asylum. Why would you do that? Isabu asked. You'd have to know the cat to understand. There was no way else to explain it. By the way, what happened to the rest of the crew? Naruto asked Joker, continuing the conversation. I mean, besides Gurus and Quan Misley. Well, most survived. Presley didn't, he added with a mournful touch. The rest of us just sort of drifted apart. The Alliance didn't care. I don't think they liked all the non-humans in your crew. We were your team, Commander. With the Normandy gone and you MIA, there wasn't much keeping us together. The only one I actually kept in contact with was Maya, and that stopped a year ago. What happened to her? She went back to her old job on Earth. She's a swagman again? He shook his head. No, not that job. The other one. Oh right, she was something else before she came aboard. She's back in the damned land as a park ranger? After all she had done with him, she went back to being a park ranger? Yep, that's the one. What about Liara? His pilot shrugged. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? If you kept in contact with Maya, you must have kept in contact with Liara. The two were together before the Normandy had been attacked. Everyone had said that they made quite the nice couple. That's the thing. Maya went back to the damned land alone. Liara wasn't with her. A beeping sound began to echo around in the cockpit, getting Joker's attention. He turned the chair back around and looked at his screens. We've arrived, he announced. Location, 2175 AIA. When the shuttle hit the ground and the hatch opened, the away team got out. Naruto had Grunt take point while Quan Misley took the rear. He wouldn't have taken the hunter on the mission, but he felt that she would be needed. He and Jacob took the sides. Everyone had their weapon out and pointed, but there were no enemy targets to shoot at, giving them a chance to look at the world around them. It was beautiful, at first glance. The sun of the system was shining bright, managing to light up the planet through the haze of clouds the shuttle had to fly through. The team didn't feel too cold or too hot, which meant that the temperature was at that nice little sweet spot between both. The wind around them carried that same level of warmth, and also carried the faint smell of salt, which made sense since they landed close to the ocean. There was nothing that looked dead to them. In fact, everything looked green and healthy. It seemed to be the perfect paradise. There was only one problem with this ideal scene: the crashed ship buried halfway into the ocean. In space it might not have counted among the biggest of the many different kinds of ships out in the galaxy, but here on the planet, it seemed colossal. Luck was on their side because of that size. They had been able to locate a landing spot close enough. From a distance nothing looked wrong with it, only that crashed. I have run a scan of the ship, EDI told Naruto through his comm. I detect no life signs, but there may be useful technology or information inside. Copy that, EDI, he replied before looking at the away team. He chose to only wear the armor, so what they saw was the snarling fox. We'll check out the ship, but our main priority is the location of the survivors and the tribe base. Any questions? He asked. They were silent. Good. Time to play the game. Grunt, take point and tell me what you see. I see a big wrecked ship, the Krogan told him. Is that all, aside from the planet? Yes, baby steps, Gaki, baby steps, Kurama told his Jinchuriki. I know, he replied. Keep your eyes open and tell me what you see as we go. Now move out. They started and the shuttle took off, roaring in their ears behind them. It was a brief shadow over their heads as it flew away. It soon became a speck on the horizon, but the team was more focused on following the path that led down to the ship. There it is, Jacob said simply, looking at the crashed ship, and mostly intact. They could have survived the impact, but it's been years, so they're probably dead, Grunt declared. Possibly, he agreed. We don't know that, and I'm not going to believe it until I see bodies, Naruto told them both. You two should do the same. Looks like it was stripped after the crash, Jacob pointed out. They'd have tried to get a beacon up as soon as possible. Now that they were closer, Naruto could see what he was talking about. The ship was missing pieces out of its hull, like wounds sustained in battle that didn't leave. There were vital pieces missing too, so it made the wounds seem like they were vital organs. It was a gruesome thought, but one that could be applied, especially when Naruto noticed additional details. Grunt, what do you see? He asked again. I already said I see a big wrecked ship, his student replied. Look harder. He snorted in derision but did as he was told. He looked up at the ship as they came closer. I see a wrecked ship with pieces missing. Like he said, the important parts, like the comm link and the weapons systems, are missing. What else? His sensei asked. There's nothing else. Yes, there is. No, there wasn't. He was getting annoyed by his sensei's badgering. It's just a wrecked ship with parts missing. What parts? He asked as they came close enough to have to turn their heads to see it fully. I already told you that. He growled warningly. The comm link and the weapons system are gone. It was there for them to see. There are also strips of metal taken off the hull long enough to be segmented and cut into smaller pieces. Like making shelter, the blonde told him calmly. Look up at the ship again and see it. He did just that. This time, he saw what his sensei was talking about. He had assumed that those tears had been from the crash, but now he could see that they were too precise and methodical to have come from that. I didn't see that, he conceded. I know you didn't. Just like you didn't see what's around you right now. What? He brought his eyes sharply down from the ship to look around himself. He hadn't noticed until that moment that they had walked into what could be called an initial survivor's outpost. There were crates and supplies placed every which way all around him. You should be aware of what's around you always, Grunt, his sensei told him as they came to a stop. Otherwise, you're likely to be caught unawares and end up dead. Humph, he snorted, feeling a little put out by being corrected. He didn't know what making sure to see everything had to do with learning how to control his power. How does this help me? It makes you more aware and more knowledgeable, which helps build your chakra. Now, is there anything here that could help us? He asked, gesturing at the outpost with his gun. Look and tell me. He lowered the assault rifle in his hands and took a hard look around them. He looked again and again, trying to make sure that he was seeing everything that was there. But all he was seeing was a mess of crates and supplies. Someone couldn't even put one of those log machines away properly. Wait, he turned back to look at the log and walked over to it. It was battered and nicked around the edges but still seemed to be in good shape. A green light on the side flickered, telling him that it was still working. Here, he called to the others. You got something? Jacob asked as they came over. Perhaps. Somebody want to turn this thing on already? Got it, he told the Krogan, activating his Omni tool and linking it to the log. It came with a squeal of noise that made the humans in the group wince. That screen was showing nothing but static, but they could hear a voice coming from it. It sounded scratchy, but it was recognizable. Along with this anymore, it began, an older male's voice. We've done horrible things to the crew. The conditions they're in, they don't understand what we're doing to them. Distract them for 2 seconds and they forget what you did before the bruises show. It's got to stop. I'm talking to the others as soon as... The sound of his voice disappeared into a buzz of white noise before the entire thing went dead. Well, that was helpful, Naruto stated. Nicely done on looking, Grunt. His student said nothing, looking bored. Repeat. Toxicology alert. Danger of rapid neural decay. Local flora chemically incompatible with human physiology, a voice announced. They all turned to look at where it was coming from. There was a 6 setup nearby. The person that was showed to them was an orange man with purple eyes and streams of light coursing over the skin. But while a 6 was supposed to stay still, this one kept flickering around at angles. This doesn't make sense, Jacob said as they went over to it, taking a closer look. This beacon has been here for some time. Why would they wait years before sending a signal? The VI had to have heard him as it responded with pause and beacon protocol. 8 years, 237 days, 7 hours. Pause is recorded as record deleted by acting Captain Ronald Taylor. He frowned confusedly. That's not right. My father was first officer. Ronald Taylor was promoted under emergency protocols. Other flagged issues: unsafe deceleration, local food and neural decay. Beacon activation protocols. $10 says unsafe declaration means crash, Naruto said to the team. He looked up at the 6. Could we have the details? Following an unspecified impact and sublight drive failure, the Hugo Grenzbach made an unscheduled descent at 46.5% of theoretical recommended suborbital velocity. The Hugo Grenzbach then decelerated at 782% of theoretical recommended approach velocity, sustaining significant damage to investment and crew. That explains the crash, but not why my father is in command, Jacob said. And where the survivors are, Quan Misley added. The machine answered them. Captain Harris Fairchild reported killed following unscheduled suborbital descent. First Officer Ronald Taylor promoted in field to acting captain. But where is he now? Jacob asked. The current location of the remaining crew of the Hugo Gernsback is unknown. This beacon has been unattended for several maintenance cycles. Last known location of the remaining crew of the Hugo Gernsback was moving towards a ruin-like location further inland. That answer made them all look at one another. It could be the base we're looking for, Quan Misley said. Could be, Naruto agreed noncommittedly. Then let's move already, Grunt told them both. Wait, Jacob said, stopping him. There are still a few things we need to know. He looked at the six. Why did this beacon take so long to activate? This emergency beacon became functional after 358 days, 12 hours, following the unscheduled suborbital descent of the Hugo Gernsback. Activation was triggered remotely after 8 years, 237 days, 7 hours, on the authority of Acting Captain Ronald Taylor. Pause in beacon protocol is recorded as record deleted. Okay, I think it's safe to say that something is going on here, Naruto decided once the six stopped. Let's check the ship, Jacob suggested. My father had the beacon for almost 9 years. Maybe that neural decay affected him too. That long? He's got it, Grunt decided. We check the ship, but we make it quick, the blonde amongst them decided. They lucked out when they crossed the bridge into the ship, finding another log machine. But what they got out of it didn't sound good. Always said no, it began, already off to a bad start. She even threatened to report if I didn't stop sending messages. But now she's so innocent. They all are, and that look she gives me when she smiles. It's sure easier now. What's the harm? We're stuck here That doesn't sound good, Quan Misley said as the logs stopped with white noise attached. Find other logs, check them to see if they have anything, Naruto ordered. They only found 2 more, both were women's voices. The first one was the more normal of the two. Crash, you can't expect the luxury of due process, but this isn't a military ship. Just bumping the command line up a notch doesn't work. Captain Fairchild knew this crew. His replacement doesn't command the same level of respect. I'm hoping the man has it in him, but I doubt. The second one came from looked like the remains of the medical station on the ship. This one was much more hysterical and confused in voice and tone. What was her name? Sarah. S. Suzanne. My God, I can't remember. I can't remember her face. We need to get out, so I can think straight. They have to hurry. What the fuck was going on here? Jacob asked when the recording stopped playing and Quan Misley lowered her Omni-tool. I've got a better question, Grunt said. Why would a beacon take a year to activate? I've got a better one, Quan Misley replied. What the hell is actually happening to these people? I think the machine can answer the second one, Naruto said, his face a hard scowl, turning on his heel and marching out of the ship. He went back to the sixth and demanded the answer. Impairment of mental function due to chemical imbalance begins within 7 days of ingesting local flora, regardless of decontamination or preparation. Impact on higher cognitive abilities and long-term memories is cumulative but significant within a month. It is known if neural decay is permanent. Data collection was not completed. That's a whole lot of tech talk, Grunt grumbled as it finished talking. Take the tech talk with what you heard inside the ship, Grunt, and connect the dots, Naruto told him, still facing the six. He was somewhat certain on what had happened here, but he didn't know for sure. The Krogan was still thinking it over when the hunter figured it out. Oh shit, Quan Misley swore. Oh shit, he agreed. Grunt figured it out and let out a dangerous growl, his fingers tightening around his weapon. He may have been tank-bred and fed only images of what he was supposed to know. But he knew that what he figured out was just wrong. Commander, the priority is still the tribe base, Miranda said through the comm. Please remember this. I know, he snapped at her. You can't ignore this, Yuki said. He has to, Sun argued. They didn't come here primarily for Jacob's father. There's a tribe base here on planet, set here probably because of what the plants could do to humans. If there's information about his chakra still there, he has to get moving. Son, you heard what those recordings said just as well as we did, Saiken said in protest. You know what is happening to those women. Are you really suggesting he just leaves them all behind? I've made that choice before, Naruto silently told them, remembering all the times during the war he had to make that particular kind of judgment call. He hated calling it, and hated it even more when he found out that he made the wrong call. But he still kept doing it. And he would still do it. We keep moving, he told his team. We're finding the base. No one argued with him on that, even though Jacob's face had a hard, grim look on it. They walked away from the ship and down the path alongside the coast. The paradise-like scenery around seemed less so now. They kept their gaze focused on ahead, following the path. Their feet made no sound on the hard rock of the ground, which helped them. But that hard surface became softer when the path split into two. They looked at the ways they could go, noting how different they were just by appearance. The path on the left would go down to an actual beach, softening into sand. They saw smoke in the distance. There are people living down that way, Quan Misley said the obvious, as it had to be said. Humans or aliens? Asked Jacob. Does it matter? Grunt asked back. Yes. No, it doesn't, Naruto said. EDI, which way is the base? My scans of the planet show that there is a complex resembling standard tribe base in height, length, and width inside the forest about 5 miles inward, EDI supplied him with. He looked to the right path, the one that went upwards past the cliffs and into the tree line. There were some palm tree around the base of the cliffs, but the forest had what looked like a mixture of pine and deciduous trees. He couldn't really say what kind from this distance. Then again, he was on an alien plane. Thanks. I am also reading multiply heat signatures inside the complex. There are life forms there. What kind? Jacob asked. Maybe the locals? Asked Grunt, trying to think it through. Could be them, if there are any, Naruto acknowledged. But it could be the tribe finishing up destroying what they did in there. Negative, Commander, EDI told him. The heat signatures are not the right levels for any Ancestry, Solarian, or Turian life forms. They are, however, the right levels for human life forms. It looks like we'll be finding the survivors anyhow, Gyuki said with a hint of satisfaction. EDI, can you double-check that? The shinobi asked, looking back down at the smoke coming from the beach. We were sure that there was life on the beach, not in the forest. I am sure, Commander. There are life forms in the complex. However, there are also life forms on the beach too. The group in the complex is larger than the group on the beach, but both are human. What does that? Jacob wondered. Why would the survivors split up? I don't know, Naruto said, looking back at the beach and the smoke again. Something must have happened and the survivors must have split up, but I'm not going to speculate. He looked back at his team. We keep moving to the base. Keep the weapons ready, but don't put a finger on the trigger unless you have to. I'm looking at you here, Grunt, he told his student. I can see that, Grunt replied, seeing how he was staring right at him. I got it. He was still staring. I said I got it. I hope so. He turned his back around to look at the path to the beach, and the path to the forest again. Take point. No trigger finger. I know. I heard you the first time. The softness of the path firmed up as they reached the forest, becoming hard dirt rather than the sands or the rocks. They kept their eyes up on the cliff lines, watching out for any possible attack. None came, and when they reached the top, they relaxed a little bit. The forest lay out in front of them, like a wall of green and brown. Even though they could see into the forest, the darkness in between the trees was like the stones of the wall blocking their view of what was beyond. How far in did EDI say we had to go in? Jacob asked. 5 miles, Quan Misley answered. Then we might as well get moving, Naruto said, walking into the forest. As he walked through the trees, stepping over their roots to avoid getting tripped up, he found himself going a little slower, easier. He lowered his guns, not so low that he couldn't bring them up in a pinch, but low enough to make him look less like a threat. He wasn't the only to notice this. Gaki, you're relaxing, Kurama told him. Now's not the time for that. I know. I can't help it. The fox shook his head in exasperation. I'm not surprised. Why would you be? Gyuki asked a rhetorical question. He's from Konoha, the Kyuubi said by way of explanation. Walking under trees relaxes him. Oh yeah, forgot about that. You would, Shikaka said. What was that? The Sanbai asked with a dangerous tone to his voice. Knock it off, you two, Naruto ordered them both. My head is not a battleground. Get it? Got it, they replied, still looking moodily at one another. Good. Keep it that way. You're still relaxing, Kurama told him. I know, so do something about it. He did do something about it, putting his focus back into where they were going, raising his guns back up, and putting his stride back into the original pacing. It was a quick shift, almost unrecognizable. He looked upwards, considering going up into the trees to get better angle on the ground. But then he thought against it, thinking that it would make him relax even more. Commander, EDI spoke through the comm. There's a small group of life forms following you. They all came to a stop but still not put their fingers on the trigger. How far back? Asked Quan Misley. 2 miles back and gaining. But it does not look they are following you specifically. What does that mean? Grunt asked. They are heading to the complex, the same as you. We keep moving, Naruto decided. If they start shooting, we will shoot back, but only if they shoot first. Got it, Jacob replied. Yeah, said Grunt. Quan Misley just nodded in acknowledgement. They had walked for another 3 miles before they came across an actual person. Rather, before that person practically ran out from behind a tree into them. It was a woman dressed in the ratty remains of a uniform and with wide eyes. You came? From the sky? She asked, looking right at Naruto. The leader said you would come. He delayed for so long, but he still has power to call you, huh? He asked after a moment of surprised silence. Real smooth, Naruto, Shikaka said with a roll of his eyes. The woman kept talking, moving her black dirty hair out of her eyes with frantic hands. Some have lost faith. The hunters. They will have seen your star. They will try to stop you from helping him. Starting making sense, Grunt growled at her. She flinched and looked at him, her brown eyes going even wider, if that was truly possible. I don't remember how to say it. He's our leader, and we serve so, we can go home. But some want to fight him. They were cast out. He exiled them, so they hunt his machines and those who help him. They don't belie. She faltered in her words and her wide eyes became terrified. That terrified made Naruto go still. We're not alone here, are we? He asked her. She shook her head rapidly, unable to even speak. He turned around slowly and saw 4 more humans standing behind his group. They were wearing uniforms just as ratty as hers. The difference was that they were all men, and they all had guns up and pointing at them. Everyone was facing each other, and no one had fired a shot yet. Hunters, the woman said in a frightened voice. They will not stop until the leader is dead. She cowered behind Naruto's back, using him as a shield. Well, this is a problem, Kurama commented. I know, his Jinchuriki replied, still looking at the 4 hunters before him. Their eyes were just as wide as hers, but they were also angry. What are you going to do? Try talking to them. If you're going to, don't start with afternoon, he said to the hunters cordially, peeling back his helmet so they could see his face. Afternoon, the fox finished. Why do I bother? The hunters didn't seem to be interested in talking. Kill them! Agents of the liar! He will not escape! The one in the front shouted, raising his weapon. So much for that idea, Naruto thought to himself. What else were you expecting? Kurama asked him. I was just hoping that I could get out of this kind of situation once without having to fight people. It gets annoying after a while. This is coming from you? Shikaka asked. He began to snicker, and the other 7 Biju began to snicker too. Shut up, Naruto said. Shut up, Kurama said at the same time. There was about a half-second of a pause before he continued with, what are you going to do, Gaki? I've got an idea. What? Excuse me, please hold for a moment, the shinobi said to the hunters, making them stop in their tracks. Tell me I didn't just hear that. I'd be lying if I did. You are a complete idiot, you know that? You say that, yet they're doing as they're told. The hunters hadn't moved from the spot. Now, can I continue or do I have to get your permission? Fine, whatever, the fox said in resignation. Just get on with it. Grunt, you see the log behind them? He asked his student. Yeah, I see it, Grunt replied. It was a big mossy kind of log, more green than brown while it lay where it fell, against the trunk of an old and tall tree. It stood out somewhat in the starkness of the green against the brown trunk. Switch yourself with it. How? He asked, eyeing the back of his sensei's head like he had just lost his mind. Like I taught and showed you. You want to use your power? This is your chance. He grinned evilly at the prospect. Great. He dropped his gun to the ground and formed his hands into what felt the most comfortable and right. He and his sensei had figured, with only one fight, that forming the traditional human hand seals wouldn't really work for him. Neither would the language, it kept getting stuck in his mouth. He had to adapt, and he was still adapting, learning the jutsu a 10-year-old from Earth would have learned. Grunt, this will be the only jutsu you're using, Naruto told him before he could do anything. After that, you'll use taijutsu only. That's fine by me. It just meant more fun for him. Great and Holy One, what is he doing? The woman asked, peeking out from behind the blonde's back. Great and Holy One? He repeated. What does? Oh no. A growing sense of horror began to fill his stomach. Oh yes, Sun said, beginning to snicker at his horror. Grunt growled in Krogan, speaking the name of the jutsu in that tongue, and instantly vanished with a puff of smoke. It was a little reassuring to see that happen for some odd reason to the blonde. When the smoke cleared, the log was amongst the team and Grunt was behind the hunters. They barely had a chance to turn around before he grabbed the closest one and snapped his neck. The others just watched as the Krogan attacked. He didn't attack with any kind of finesse, preferring just to straight-up bulldoze his way through them. His punches were crude and were more for delivering maximum pain with each swing at the cost of stamina. An experienced fighter would have been able to outlast him and take him down without even losing his breath. But as the hunters were not experienced, Grunt was fine. You may have to work on his technique for a bit, Coco commented as the Krogan punched a hunter so hard he flew back and was impaled onto a tree by his own broken bones. A bit? Repeated Isabu. He needs to have a technique in order to work on it. Right now, he's just swinging wildly. At least he's not adding and kicking, Gyuki said. He's smart enough to realize that doing that like he's doing the punching will make him even more tired and would give the hunters a chance to strike back. One of the remaining hunters screamed as he was thrown over Grunt's back and lost his arm in the process. Ooh, that's going to hurt, Matatabi said with a wince of sympathy. No, it won't. He'll be dead, Komiai told the cat. While the hunter lay on the ground writhing in pain, Grunt just raised his foot and stomped down on the man's face, caving it in with a gush of blood. See, and he used his foot too, Saiken commented. He's branching out. Yeah, but just as crudely, Gyuki added, watching as the Krogan removed his foot from what used to be a face. He doesn't need work. He needs a lot of work. Why do you think I'm training him? Naruto silently asked. The last hunter dropped his gun and leapt onto Grunt's back, screaming like a loon and trying to suffocate the Krogan. But he was too weak and Grunt's neck was too thick for him to actually succeed. All he got was a piggyback ride that he probably regretted. The reason for the regret occurred when Grunt backed into the tree with a slam. The hunter died instantly, but the Krogan kept slamming him into the tree. Grunt, that's enough, Naruto called out to his student. But he kept slamming, making the tree shake each time. I said that's enough. The Krogan kept on slamming his back into the tree, so the blonde fired one shot at the trunk just above his head. He went still and glared at his sensei. But Naruto stared right back. I will not say it a third time. Grunt got the hint and let the body fall to the ground. Well? He asked his sensei as he walked back over to him, not bothering to care whether he stepped on the men he killed or not. The shinobi looked at the scene of carnage before him, and then back at the Krogan standing in front of him. You need to learn how to fight, he said shortly. I do know how to fight, not from what I've seen. It didn't help that I had poor opponents. Are you making excuses, Grunt? He asked his student. No, I am not. Those humans were not decaying. They were feral. He's right, Commander, Quan Misley agreed. They didn't even try shooting him when he attacked them. They attacked with their own hands when they should have known that they were outmatched. She was right, they should have known that. They probably had met Krogan before the crash and knew that attacking them head-on would be tantamount to suicide for most people. But they still did it. My father wouldn't let this go on, Jacob said, but with more than a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Something is very wrong. The man was right. It was wrong and it was weird. But while it was weird, it was a passing concern. He turned back around to the woman standing behind him. She looked up at him with wide eyes and a smile. Before he could even say anything to her, she reached out and pulled him into a kiss. He tried to protest, but the kiss was drowning everything else out. You stud you, Shikaka said with a big grin on his face. We couldn't be prouder of you, Gyuki proclaimed. Pray, tell us how you ensnare them so well, Komiai pleaded with humor in his voice. Are you going to do this to all the women you meet? Isabu asked, clearly trying to be funny about it. He should, Kurama said with a very smug smile on his lips. He's a student of Jiraiya. I'm surprised that he hadn't done it before now. This isn't helping me. He shouted at them while trying to get the woman off him. But for someone who didn't have a lot of brainpower left, she was surprisingly able to keep him in place and keep on kissing him. We know. We just find this remarkable amusing. It's not for me, we also know that. It's a part of our amusement. You are such a lady killer, Gaki. You should be proud of it. If you're not going to help me then just, oh dear Kami, is that her tongue? He mentally screamed as he felt something wet trying to pry his teeth open. As the idiot Tanuki said, you stud you. Hey, said the so-called idiot Tanuki. Not helping, we know. We don't care, Kurama told him. If it helps any, she's still trying to get her tongue in your mouth, Isabu offered. I know. It was a great deal of effort to prevent that very thing from happening. She was insistent. He tried signaling the others with his eyes to get her off, but they just stood there like they had been struck dumb. He was finally able to get his hands free from her grip and pushed her away, gasping in a big breath of air. He kept her at arm's length while he started breathing again. Holy One, do I displease you? She asked him, looking innocent and hurt at the same time. He didn't bother to look at her, choosing to focus instead on his team. Why didn't you stop her? Oh, was that what you wanted? Jacob asked, looking awkward and embarrassed at the same time. Yes, we thought you were enjoying yourself, Grunt said, very amused at what he had seen. Incoming, Kurama idly warned him. He turned his attention back to the woman and stopped her just before she kissed him again. Okay, that's enough. Get off already, he told her, pushing her away. She stumbled back away from him and fell to the ground, landing on her rear. He activated his helmet, letting it encase his head again. She looked up at him, still managing to look innocent and hurt, and added tears to it. Oh great, you're going to make her cry, Shikaka told him with a smirk. Shut up, he told the tanuki, but the tanuki kept going. Since when did you become such a heartbreaker? Your sensei would be ashamed of you. Did he ever break women's hearts like this? I said shut up. Would one of you already beat him into the ground already? He demanded of the other Biju. When they did nothing, he mentally snarled at all of them. He looked back at the woman, who had started crying already. Lowering his guns and kneeling down to her level, he looked her in the eye. Hey, are you okay? He asked her in a gentle voice. You killed them, but there are more every day, she said, looking at the dead hunters. They want to fight, but I just want to go home. She's lost it, Jacob decided. We need to find someone who can make sense of this. Naruto looked up at him. There's a way to do that. He looked back at the woman. We want to see the leader. Can you take us to him? The tears vanished, and she smiled as she stood up. Come on, she said, grabbing hold of his hand and pulling him into the forest deeper. Whoa! Hold on, there's no need to pull. He freed his hand from her grip and stopped for a moment. She looked hurt again, so he said what he had to say quickly. We can follow you fine. You only have to lead us. Her hurt look vanished, and her smile came back. Okay. Follow me to the leader. She again led them into the forest deeper. As they walked after her, Naruto silently signaled Jacob to walk beside him. Yeah, Commander? He asked once he was at the blonde's side. Was your father a niner? He asked in return. He considered it for a moment before answering. As far as I can remember, he wasn't a fanatical one. I think he just believed in it because of his lineage. Well, he might have become fanatic during his time here. What the woman had called him made him uncomfortable. I don't disagree, sir. I'm beginning to have my suspicions about this planet. The conversation finished, he moved back over to his first spot and kept walking in silence. At the end of their journey, they saw the complex that used to belong to the tribe. The forest had creeped right up to and then over it. Root and vine were spread over the walls surrounding the place. The gate entrance didn't have any kind of door or shielding mechanism. What it did have were a couple of turrets, big ones. There were people manning the turrets, but as they got closer, they saw that none of them were men. Grunt watched the turrets and the people sitting behind them as he came closer, his finger away from the trigger as ordered. He watched, trying to see what could be seen. What he saw was that they didn't try to call out to stop them, or move the turrets into a firing position. They looked like they had been told to sit there, and that's what they did. They were also wearing the same ratty uniforms as the woman leading them and the hunters. Their eyes had the same wideness to them. Dim, he finally said quietly so the team could only hear him, but from the same clan that attacked us. Where are the men, Grunt? His sensei asked him. I don't know. Maybe what's causing this affects the men differently, makes them angrier, forcing them to be exiled? Quan Misli suggested. If the males were exiled, they die or get stronger, he told the hunter. How else should it be? It doesn't matter right now, Jacob told the Krogan, a tone of impatience coloring his voice. One of these people must know what my father has to do with this. Halt! The woman manning the turret on the left finally shouted. I was wondering when they were going to get to that, Komi commented. They came to a stop right before the gate, keeping a healthy look on the turrets. It's all right. The woman shouted up to them. The Great and Holy One is here. The women manning the turrets looked at one another for a moment. Then they climbed down to the ground. If they had any kind of military training, they would have known that was a bad move. But none of them said anything about it, not wanting to make the situation worse. They came closer, pushing the woman who led them to the side. Not very friendly to each other, are they? The team thought to themselves. They were originally heading for Naruto, but they stopped in their tracks when they saw Jacob. You have his face, the redhead of the two said to him with surprise and horror in her voice. He promised to call the sky, but he sends nothing. He forced us to eat, to decay, the dark-skinned woman beside her said. She scowled at Jacob and raised a fist. You are cursed with his face. She took a step towards him and might have punched him if Naruto hadn't gotten in her way and stopped the fist. You don't need to do that, he told her, gently forcing the fist back down. Taking a risk, he lowered his helmet again. When she looked at him, Her wide eyes were alight with her surprise. The Holy One? She asked in a trembling voice. Yes. The woman they found in the forest said, nodding her head with a big smile on her face. The Holy One has come. Oh boy, it spread, he thought with an inward cringe. For once, the Bijou had nothing to say in reply to it. He wants to see the leader, the woman continued. The turret women looked at each other again. The red-headed one nodded and looked back at them. If the Holy One wishes to see him, he shall be welcomed. But the cursed face will not come, she declared, pointing at Jacob. It was the beginnings of a sticky situation, starting with Naruto saying he's with me. The redhead shook her head. No, he does not come. He stays. He's with me. No, yes. He comes with me to see the leader. No, he does not come, she insisted. He could have let the argument drag on, but he wasn't in the mood. So instead, he leveled her with one look and asked, You would dare refuse the Holy One? She fell silent with an open mouth, staring at him. To her rescue came the black-haired woman. No, we would not refuse the Holy One. Then he comes with me to see the leader, then pass. They stepped aside and their guide led them into the complex. The distance between the gate and the complex was about 10 long strides in length. In that distance, they saw a camp spread out on the open grounds. The best description that could be applied was ramshackle. There were huts made of whatever could be scrapped together into a building material scattered all over the ground. Fires were burning in pits, barrels, and anything that could hold it. What the hell is going on here? Jacob asked as he looked at everything he could. I don't know, but it's not something good, Naruto said, looking at everything too. All he could see were women moving between huts, fires, and whatever else stood in their way. He saw no men. It was beginning to become disconcerting. Commander, you should look to your left, Quan Misli said to him quietly. He did and instantly regretted it. Oh, merciful Kami, is that supposed to be me? It was a statue made entirely out of scrap metal into the shape of a human. 3 streaks were cut into each cheek to make the whisker marks, and they had taken springs to make his hair. There was an arm outstretched, holding out a dish that looked like it was supposed to be spinning, and 10 pipes emerged out of the back, arcing up through the air like they were tails. What the hell? Jacob said as he saw it too. They actually built that? Why would they? My father was never that fanatic about his religion. Whatever it is, it's ugly as fuck, Grunt declared. He lifted up his gun. Can I shoot it down? No, his sensei told him instantly. Let's not incite the people here any more than we already have. All the women they had passed had either given Jacob dirty looks or just not looked at him at all. They finally stopped in front of the complex door and it opened, revealing 3 Loki mechs standing beyond it, holding weapons. Your captain demands obedience, they said in unison, monotone voice. Weapons are forbidden. No, wait. Their guide cried, standing before the mechs with her arms out. This is the Holy One. He wants to see the leader. Your captain demands obedience. Weapons are forbidden. Naruto eyed his team and they understood the silent signal. Out of sight, he flipped the guns and grabbed the barrels. He shifted his stance just enough. He's the Holy One. The mechs raised their guns. Your captain demands obey. Jacob reached out and pulled the woman out of the way just before Grunt punched the left mech's head clean off and then destroyed the body with the butt of his gun. Quan Misli blasted the center mech to pieces. Naruto raised up his guns and bashed the right mech with alternating swings. When it fell to the ground, it was nothing but a crumpled heap. They took that moment to ensure that all 3 mechs are down. Tactics like this are fit for prisoners, not your own clan, Grunt declared, lowering his own gun. He's using mechs to enforce things and making his own people eat the toxic food? Jacob asked, his face hardening into a furious look. What the hell is my father doing here? We should go ask him, Naruto said to him. You killed his machines, their guide said with wonder. Yeah, we did, Naruto said shortly. Lead on. She stared at him for a moment longer before gingerly stepping over the mechs and into the complex. The insides looked practically gutted. If there had been anything useful attached to the floors, walls, or even the ceiling, it had been torn out. The wires had even been taken, leaving giant holes in their places. The lights stayed, but they looked like they were on their last legs. The room they first walked into could have probably been a lobby if A, it wasn't in a tribe base, and B, it wasn't on its way to being ruined. Fires were lit at the 4 corners and women huddled around them just like outside. Saints preserve me, Jacob said as he took this all in, their guide whimpered. Don't say that, she told him quietly. False gods. Not true. The Holy One is the only true god. Oh great, I've been deified too, Naruto thought to himself with a silent sigh of exasperation. This was just getting out of hand now. Well, what did you expect? Gyuki asked him. They'd been stuck here for almost 10 years with a niner to follow in religion. It could have been. Don't finish that sentence, he told the Hachibi. When someone said that, it usually got worse and the phrase ended up being regretted. Go find the leader, he told their guide. We'll wait here. She looked even more worried now. But, go, he told her again. She took off at his command, vanishing through a door off to the right. Commander Idai spoke. I'm reading a large body count approaching the complex, coming from the beach. Great, just what we need. I didn't finish the sentence, Gyuki pointed out like it was a viable defense. The blonde hardly paid him attention, choosing to listen to what Idai had to say. Do you have an exact body count? Still calculating, she replied. Not to rain on the parade, but we have more than that to worry about, Joker chimed in. What does that mean? Naruto asked him. That tribe's ship is back and is currently deploying shuttles to the surface. We're silent so it hasn't noticed us, but things just got a lot worse, the blonde growled. Tell me something I don't know. They're landing on the beach and seem to be joining up with the people they're on marching to your position. He paused for a moment to let that information sink in and then groaned, quite loudly at that. Joker, you asked, was all the pilot said. You did, Shikaka agreed with him. Is there anything else we need to be concerned about here? He asked in his mind, trying to be rhetorical about it. I believe that it's coming your way, Kurama remarked. What? He turned his attention back to the room and saw one of the women making her way slowly to them. Her eyes kept going between not making eye contact and looking solely at him. You come here, he called out to her. She flinched and stopped, but he pointed to the spot in front of him. She walked to that spot and stood there. Her outfit looked a little better, a little cleaner, than everyone else, but it wasn't a long stretch. She held something in her hands and she was staring at Jacob. You have his face, she said. I do, he replied. What else could he say? But I heard sounds. Machines, destroyed. You, fight his machines. A hopeful look came onto her face. You might stop this. You got something for us? Grunt demanded. She flinched at his words and took a step back. Gaki, calm her down, she's about to rabbit, the fox told his Jinchuriki. He could see that in her slowly shifting stance, and how her eyes were darting to the corner of her eyes. Do you have something that'll help us stop this? He asked her gently. She stopped looking around the room and tuned his attention back to him. Yes, she answered with a small stutter. Her hands came up, holding a pad in them. This, I forgot how to read, but this was the start. What he promised, and what they did to us. She held it out to be taken and Jacob took it from her, but once it was out of her hands she started backing away. We need the sky. Take us back to the sky, she all but begged Naruto. She turned and walked away quickly, not allowing him to answer. Jacob? The blonde said. He was already tapping away at the pad, opening the contents and reading them. It's a crew logbook. Some of them thought that the beacon repair was taking too long. They were afraid that they'd run out of supplies and lose their minds to the decay, he told them. My father restricted the ship food for himself and the other officers so they wouldn't be affected. Everybody else had to eat the toxic food and hope for treatment later. The rest is a casualty list. A few mutinied over the decision. My father and the officers turned the matches on them. A leader who has to use force on his own men is not fit to be a leader, Grunt declared with a sour look. Some people aren't able to handle the pressures of being in command, Naruto said. They crack. He had seen it happen more than once in the war. Men and women who seemed promising not following through on that promise when it came time to do so. They'd become indecisive, freeze, or just send the people under their command to their deaths. The tricky ones always managed to blame what happened on someone else. But they got to eventually. It didn't stop there. Jacob told them all, more incidents, harsh punishments. It's like they're cattle. Or toys, he added. In a year, all the male crew members are flagged as exiled or dead. They separated out the women. Assigned them to officers like pets. The disgust coming out of his mouth could not have been thicker. After the beacon is fixed, the officers appear in the casualties. After. My father took control and didn't stop it. Is what you're reading make sense to you? Quan Misley asked him, her face in a hard scowl. No, he said with a hard shake of his head. None of this fits. Maybe the initial decision, but the rest? Abuse of power doesn't get any clearer than this. I need to find this man, or just wait for him to come to us, Grunt said, staring out at the room. Their guide had come back, with a man. He looked like an older, more worn, and more tired version of Jacob. His hair was receding, except of a stubborn spot in the middle of his forehead. Everyone else turned and saw him too. Can we take it? It's really him, Jacob said as he looked at his father. Out of everyone in the room who had lived on the planet for the past decade, he was the only one who looked like he had just come from the ship. His uniform was a little used and worn, with a few odd patches here and there, but on the whole a much better degree of clothing than the women had. When he saw them, a relieved smile appeared on his face. "Thank goodness you've come," he said, walking up to them. "I'm Captain Ronald Taylor. I didn't think that the beacon would ever be answered." "How could you when you had it turned off?" Naruto asked him in a whisper so only he could hear it. He looked confused for a moment, but then it disappeared off his face. "I don't know what you mean." "Of course you don't. Perhaps we should speak in private." He nodded. "Yes, of course." They followed him through the door he came through and down the corridor beyond. The few women they passed couldn't meet Jacob's father in the eye, even though he smiled and nodded towards them all like he was a father or a teacher. It just made them feel even more disgusted at him. He finally turned to a door and walked into what could have been an office at some point. "Now," he said, coming around to the other side of the table, sitting down and placing his hands together on the table. "How?" quietly Naruto said. The hunter reacted, whipping out her butterfly knife and driving it through the man's hands. "Grunt." The Krogan wrapped his powerful hands around the man's mouth so he wouldn't scream. All they got out of him was a muffled sound that didn't even make it past the door. "Yeah, that's it," Sun growled. The other Biju growled with him. "Feel that pain, you worthless waste of skin." "Have her carve him up," Shikaku suggested. "Little chunks of flesh, one at a time." "Start with the fingers," Isabu added on. "Don't make it orderly. Make him guess which one he'll have to lose next," Komiai put in. While those all sounded like good ideas, he wanted answers first. "Listen up," he told the man. "He's going to take his hand off your face. Scream and what you'll be feeling now will be the least bit of pain you will suffer. Clear?" The elder Taylor nodded his head frantically. He looked at Grunt and the Krogan released his grip, just like he was told. The captain sucked in air in a great gasp. When he exhaled, he panted hard. "Who are you?" he asked, his eyes darting to try and see everyone. "We'll ask the questions. If you lie, you get more pain," Naruto said sharply. "First question, what happened to your crew?" "To total loss," he answered with a pained sound. "Toxic food made them wild. Been doing my best to make sure nothing bad happened to." His pinky finger, the shinobi ordered, cutting him off. The knife came out of the hands and then swiftly fell down on his left pinky, cutting it off right at the joint. "Don't scream," Naruto told him as he opened his mouth. He stayed like that, mouth agape and staring at his lost finger and the blood leaking out of his hands. It was obvious that he really wanted to scream, but in the end all he gave out was a pained whimper that sounded really pathetic. "Why?" he asked in that same level of voice. "I don't appreciate being lied to, not after what we've seen out there. You want to try again or should I have another finger removed from you?" I. He kept looking around with his eyes, trying to find something that might help him get free. But when they settled on Jacob, the panic became tinged with confusion. Who are you?" Jacob didn't say anything, so Naruto did. "Has it been so long for you that you can't even remember your own son?" "My son," he repeated, his words laced with shock. "Jacob?" "No, not Jacob," he said, trying to sound like he refused to believe it. "Why not me?" asked Jacob, finally breaking his silence and walking up to look at his father. "Would 10 years of this look better to anyone else in the galaxy? You have to understand. This isn't me. The realities of command, they change you," he tried explaining. "I wasn't ready for that. If I didn't know the truth of that, I would have said that he was lying," Naruto thought to himself. Something does change in a person when they become a leader. He couldn't put a name to it, but he knew it was there all the same. "I made sure you were taught right. Before I left," the elder Taylor said to his son. "I had hoped to leave it at that." 10 years, Jacob said back. "You've been gone for 10 years. Why? What happened?" His father didn't answer, choosing to look at his bleeding hands. "Saints damn you, why did you do this to your crew?" He still didn't answer. "Quanmisli," Naruto said to the hunter, who promptly raised her knife and making their captive look at her with panicked eyes. "He asked you a question? Answer it now." He licked his lips. There was resistance to the plan. "Munity," he started explaining. "We had to take a hard line to keep order. And things settled down. As the decay settled in, we made sure the crew was comfortable. Some even seemed happier." "Happier?" Jacob repeated in a growl to his voice. "Ignorance is bliss, right?" A shorter-tempered man might have roared and punched him, and Jacob might have done that if Naruto hadn't blocked his way with his arm. "Wait, let him finish," the blonde told him. He looked at their captive. "Keep talking." They were grateful for guidance, like an instinct. Pure authority was easy. At first, the acting captain told them. Months in, the effect lowered inhibitions. They got territorial. Rank protocol, they couldn't understand. We had to establish dominance. After a while, the perks seemed normal. That's it? Jacob asked him. You created a harem and played king? 10 years in a juvenile fantasy? I can't point out where it all went wrong. But when the beacon was ready, revealing what happened didn't seem like a good idea. And the other officers? He asked. Anders found his conscience a little late to step back. He had an accident. Things got tense. End of the day, I was the one with the mechs. The way he talked about it like he was talking about an old news story was unsettling. And he kept talking too. I got a little basic in setting examples, but I was kind to my people once things settled down. Seemed like I'd earned some peace, he remarked. You fought over people like they were toys. Things, his son said. What about the food and the drink? Naruto asked. The ship's supplies wouldn't have held out forever. You had to have known that. Dining for one can really stretch things out. Besides, I can think of a lot worse retirement plans than stripping down and joining the Drulas. That was before the hunters, of course. Dumb or not, I'd feel it if they got their hands on me now. They want blood. I'd prefer to keep it. It's all about you. Everything, Jacob spat. He didn't seem affected by that. How did the hunters come about? Naruto asked. This planet has some strange cycles to it. I've seen some plants around I never saw before, odd weather. Maybe some just adapted a little too well, and if you treat them like animals, big shock, they become animals? His son demanded. He was getting more and more angry. I've got a question, Grunt spoke. Where are the whelps? Everyone froze at that. All eyes turned to him. Say that again, Jacob told him. Where are the whelps? They've been here for 10 years, enough for the women to have gotten pregnant and give birth. But I didn't see any on the way in here, and it looked like most of the women were outside. Where are the whelps? Jacob turned his head back to look at his father. He's got a point. Where are the kids? There aren't any, he answered. Quanmisly, Naruto said. She lifted up her knife. I swear, I'm telling the truth. The elder tailor said quickly, flinching away from the knife. There aren't any kids on the planet. He's lying, Grunt declared. There had to be whelps on the planet. I'm not, he insisted, sounding annoyed at being called a liar. Any other situation, Naruto would have been amused at his indignation. Now he was just focused. Watch it, he warned him. You wouldn't want another finger to go missing, would you? The man gulped and shook his head. Then where are the kids? There aren't any. We made sure of it. What does that mean? He flinched and became uncomfortable again, unable to look any of them in the eyes. When we realized what was going on, the medical bay was still operational. We made sure that the women were asleep when the process was ongoing. At the end, and they were all taken care of, we were glad for it. Jacob had gone completely still, looking at his father with horrified eyes. You had their tubes tied. It was for the good of everyone. No kid should have to be born here, forced to eat what was here. He let out a scream and leapt for him, grabbing him by his head and slammed his head against the table. He did it again and again, still screaming. You sick, demented, twisted, son of a bitch. He screamed at his own flesh and blood. Jacob, get off him. Naruto told him, grabbing hold when he didn't listen and forcing him to let go. I said get off him. He pried off the hands and then pushed him back against the wall, but he came back with his gun up and pointing. We should kill him right here and now, he declared, pointing his gun at his father's head. The man's eyes widened and he probably would have tried running if Grunt wasn't there. Yes, Shikaku agreed. It's a very good idea, Isaba told Naruto. He doesn't deserve to live, Komiai declared. Commander, we've got trouble, Joker said through the comm, getting the blonde's attention. What is it? He asked. Remember that force that was heading towards the complex from the beach? They've reached the perimeter. Shit! I thought we had more time. He mentally swore. What are you going to do? Gyuki asked him. Stall, find, and bail, the first two at the same time, he answered. They needed to find that information. It was buried somewhere in this complex, probably in the science part. The question was where the lab was. He knew someone who could answer that. EDI, is the complex the same as other tribe bases? The layout is the same as previous tribe bases, yes, she answered. So the lab is the same place as the last ones? Yes, good. He activated the helmet again. Quanmisly and Jacob, you go find the lab and get any information that you find. Grunt and I will handle the people outside, he said to them all, looking at each of them when he said their names. What about him? Grunt asked, looking at the elder tailor with utter loathing in his eyes. Quan Misley, put your knife away, he told the hunter. Sir? She asked, confused. Put it away, now. She looked like she wanted to protest, but it only lasted a second. She raised her knife, swinging it back into the closed position. She holstered it back in its sheath, watching him with questioning eyes. The acting captain looked relieved to see the knife disappear. His hands separated but still remained on the table. Thank you. His thanks turned into a scream when Naruto pulled out 2 kunai and stabbed them down into the hands. Aya! He screamed loudly. I don't want your thanks. The shinobi snarled quietly into his ear, keeping his pressure down on the knives, making the pain hurt more. Just stay here and shut up. With any luck, someone will kill you. Jacob, the father began to say to the son, trying to get sympathy or help from him. You don't have the right to say that name, he snapped back, his hand going for the gun again. Jacob, put the hand down, Naruto ordered him before he could even grab the handle, pinning him where he stood with a look. He tried matching the look with his own but could not win against. He took his hand away from the gun but fixed his father with a look that proclaimed his death. I don't know who you are. Because you're not any father I remember. He looked back to the rest of the team. Let's go, this man doesn't know right from wrong. I'm sorry, Jacob, the man said. I did the best I could. I'm 10 years past believing that, he declared, already leaving the room. Everyone else followed him, leaving the man alone in the room. Naruto gave him one last look just before he left, seeing that he looked like he wanted to say something, anything. But he kept his mouth closed. The sight of him disgusted Naruto. His lips curled back into a sneer as he looked at the man. There was nothing else to say, so he turned his back and walked out. Edi, how far away is the force? Jacob asked into the calm while the door closed behind Naruto. They will be approaching the front gate is under 5 minutes, Edi replied. There's no time to dick around, the shinobi amongst them decided. Everyone get to where you have to be and take care of your task. He started walking back down the corridor they had come from. Grunt, follow. Right, his student said. They reached the complex grounds and saw that the women were going about their business like nothing was wrong. Do they even know what's coming? Saiken asked. They've lived this long, they might not think this to be any real threat, Matatabi suggested. There's a way around that, Naruto told them. You've got an idea? Gyuki asked him. Yes. Plan on sharing with the class? Kurama asked. Just watch, he replied. Grunt, one burst in the air, he told the Krogan standing beside him. We want their attention, not their fear. Got it, Grunt replied, lifting his gun up and pulling the trigger. The air came alive with gunfire, getting the attention of the women in the yard. They looked at the 2 males with confusion and fear in their eyes, doing in such a way that Naruto had a gut feeling to reassure them that he'd be there to protect them. Gaki, focus please, the Kyuubi reminded him. Right, thanks, he replied, the urge vanishing from inside of him. Your attention, please, he called out to the yard. Really? Asked Shikaku. Not now, he told the Tanuki, focusing on the women. The hunters are coming again, in force. His machines will protect us, one woman told him, her voice trending the line between hatred and nervousness. That may be. But even so, they are coming. Get inside. His machines will protect us. We are safe. Do not scowl, he told himself as he felt the urge coming. To scowl now would most likely make things more difficult. Besides, they couldn't see his face. I wasn't suggesting that you get inside. I was telling you. Get inside now. Some still looked like they would try and protest, until the woman from the forest came to the front. It is the Holy One, she said to the women. Her words washed over them like water over stone. Once they knew that, they didn't hesitate to obey his command. Only the women manning the turrets stayed behind while the others moved in a single motion inside the complex. Why aren't they going? Grunt asked, looking at the turrets. They probably have orders, Naruto replied. It saves us the time of manning them ourselves. HGH, good point, he said back. The hunters appeared out of tree line and started shooting the same time the turrets. They were exchanging fire and hunters were falling, but they still kept coming. The numbers just seemed to pour out of the forest in a constant motion. Both teacher and student waited until they were halfway to the gate before they started shooting. Grunt sprayed and prayed while his teacher went for the individual kills, taking out one hunter at a time. Any reloading they had to do was quick and effortless, coming from repeated practice. But the hunters were still coming. Grunt's method was knocking them down, but they kept managing to get back up. Naruto's method was much more precise, but it was too little to be effective. Once the hunters saw them, they started shooting at them too. As they felt the bullets hit, both the human and the Krogan could feel their shields shake them off. So many bullets hitting them all at once, It was beginning to feel like they were right next to a drum being pounded hard. Gah! Suddenly yelled Grunt, his gun involuntarily dropping for a moment. He fell back behind the turret on the right. Grunt, you good? Asked Naruto, still shooting. His left gun went empty. He discharged the clip and kept firing with the right. A few seconds later that went empty too. He fell back behind the turret on the left to reload. It grazed me, he growled, holding his arm with blood leaking out between his fingers. That son of a damn pyjak can't even shoot me properly. He shouted back around the corner. That decay can't even make them shoot straight. One of the women screamed. They both looked up and saw the left turret chair suddenly empty. Its gunner was the ground dead. There were no less than 4 bullets in her stomach and 1 in her throat. It looks like they can shoot straight, the blonde said to his student. Switch to the chakra clips, Katan, he ordered, already doing that for his own guns. Grunt grinned and did the same. Once the clips were in, they turned back out of the corners and started shooting again. This time, the opposite happened. While Naruto's shooting killed his targets and set aflame, it was Grunt's spraying and praying that was taking them all to the death. There were so many hunters being set on fire the entire body was beginning to look like a sea of flame. Cooked meat began filling the air. Naruto might have found it to be a good smell if he didn't see where it was coming from and couldn't hear the screams from the burning men, but the line was holding. Any of the hunters that tried to get close were shot and set on fire. But while the line was holding, more of them kept coming. For the love of Kami, how many are there? Naruto asked himself. Probably enough to make you wish that you had brought more equipment, Saiken offered. You need to get someone on that turret, Kurama told him. And who would that be? He asked as he shot down another hunter. All the women went inside and I'm a bit busy. You baka, the fox replied. Use a clone to man it. Did you miss the fact that I was busy? My hands are full shooting these guys. 2 more hunters were killed and he wounded 3 more, all set aflame. They turned and ran screaming back into their group, spreading the fire around. That was happening a lot with each person he wounded. You're a shinobi, multitask, AIE. The woman in the turret screamed as she fell out of her chair, clutching her chest. If the wound she got didn't kill, how she landed did. Both Naruto and Grunt heard her neck snap as she landed face first on the ground. Shit, like I said, multitask, repeated Kurama. Alright, he said back. Grunt, give me cover. Fine, his student said back. He kept on shooting while his teacher fell back behind the turret again. Kaige Bunshin no Jutsu, he said, making the hand seal while still holding his guns, which made it a little awkward. But the intended effect still happened and 2 clones came into existence. As soon as they appeared, they went for the turrets, climbing up them so quick they were shadows against the concrete, and started them up. The turrets came to life and pounded away at the hunters. Things seemed to be holding. As Naruto himself came back into the fight, he also checked on the other team's progress. Jacob, how we doing? He asked through the comm, having to raise his voice slightly to get it over the noise. We're almost at the lab now, Commander, Jacob replied. What's taking so long? He demanded while putting a bullet through a hunter's eye. He would have thought that they got there by now. The women keep trying to block our path because of my face. Quan Misley has been taking the lead now. Get moving. We're holding them off, but I don't think this will hold forever. He thought that the horde of hunters was ending, but that could have been his mind playing tricks on him. Things changed on the battlefield. We're moving as fast as we can. Then move faster. That tribe's ship is still up there. When he said that, it also made him wonder where exactly those people were. He would have thought that they would have shown their faces by now, but there was nothing. I don't think we can move any faster. The corridors are clogged with the women. Then tell Quan Misley to whip out her knife and threaten to use it. Sir? He asked with disbelief and confusion so thick in his voice, the blonde could practically taste it through the comm. Just do it. He ended the call. How are you holding up, Grunt? He called over to the Krogan. I'm doing great. He shouted out with a grin on his face. This is I was bred for. He looked like he wanted to drop the gun and leap at the hunters, using only his fists to fight. Keep that bloodlust under control, Grunt. He ordered his student. Why should I? The grin was getting more and more feral. Because I told you to. He shouted. The grin began turning into a snarl and his blue eyes began to look angry. Grunt, curb the bloodlust. Now. The blonde ordered him again. All right, I'm doing it. He replied very reluctantly. Good. How are you doing for ammo? He looked down at the gun, reading the number on the top. Shit, I'm almost out. Do you have any remaining clips? I don't think so. If I run out, they're going to come at us in full force. He didn't sound like that was something that would be concerning to him. Rather, it was something that he was looking forward to. "Commander?" said EDI through the comm. "What?" he demanded in irritation. "There is something happening on the radar. It seems that the tribe forces are making their way to you." "About time," he said with exasperation. "Where are they coming from?" Additional fire started echoing from beyond the trees. Shouts of surprise and screams began to erupt from the hunters, only to be silenced immediately. Both he and Grunt stopped shooting when they stopped and turned around to see what was going on. "From the woods," EDI told him redundantly. He knew they were coming from the woods. He could already see them emerging, shooting down every hunter that got in their way. At their front was the huntress, and she looked rather angry and vindictive. "Shit," he swore at the sight of her. "Excellent choice of words," Shikaku remarked drily. Codex entry, Military Lucha Libre. A form of wrestling that is most popularly practiced in the Great Jungle. Lucha Libre, Hispano dialect, free wrestling, is a martial art that came from the hunter Rodrigo Salazar, deciding to find a more standardized hand-to-hand combat system for his people. After studying a variety of styles, which include hero-style pankration, samurai jiujutsu, and shinobi taijutsu, Lucha Libre was born when that silent hunter, who would eventually become known as the first El Diablo Loco, Hispano dialect, the Crazy Devil, combined those styles to make a unique martial art. Instead of focusing upon brute strength as pankration style are known to do, luchadors, Lucha Libre practitioners, emphasize more on acrobatics and flexibility to grapple with the opponent using their own power against them. While the sport version adds more flair and requires the wrestlers to wear gaudy masks, a wrestler that is unmasked is often dishonored. The military Lucha Libre style uses a more simplified and practical version of those same moves for one particular tactic, using the terrain to beat the living daylights out of the opponent. There are two basic styles of Lucha Libre, Ruto and Technico. Ruto-style luchadors tend to be stronger, and make use of underhanded tactics to defeat the enemy, while Technico-style emphasizes on the use of pure technique to win the match. Either way, military-style luchadors are at least as acrobatic and flexible as sport luchadors, and are always taught to adjust their fighting style according to where they are fighting, i.e. if in a restroom, the fighter will focus on smashing his or her opponent's face into the wall, or the counter as much as possible. Sport Lucha Libre is televised primarily from Great Jungle colonies, and is a popular spectacle, especially for Batarians, Turians, and Krogan. Fairly soon, the sport allowed cross-species matchups to be possible, and so humans could wrestle against even Asari luchadoras. Chapter 43, From the Hunted to the Hunter. Location, 2175 AIA. The first thing Naruto saw about the huntress was her new eye. It was a bright blue mechanical thing that had plates welded onto her face around the socket. The flesh itself had turned to a pasty blue color, paling from what the rest of her skin tone looked like. There was no lid to the eye, so it stared unblinkingly at him. There was no emotion in that eye, but he could see the hatred she had for him in the other. She kept her gaze on him as she walked over the bodies of the hunters she had killed and he had set on fire. Her men followed her but at a distance, staying about 2 feet behind her. "You," she all but snarled at Naruto. He didn't know what else to say, so he went with me, causing the fox in his head to groan loudly. "You know her?" Grunt asked him, keeping his gun at the ready. "I would say that we have a history, but we've only met once." "Where you knifed out my eye?" The huntress told them both, loudly. "You knifed out her eye?" Grunt asked his teacher, sounding impressed by his action. "Had to," he replied like it was not something that had to be impressed by, casually shrugging to add to the effect. "Not the time to shrug your shoulders," Kurama told him pointedly and irritably. "So why did you knife out her eye?" his student asked him. He sounded interested in the facts, and not in the fight in front of them. "Grunt, focus on what's going on here," he said back, probably a little more sharply than intended. The Krogan frowned in annoyance. He really wanted to hear about the knifing. "Fine, but we're talking about this later." "No, you won't be talking about it later," the huntress said, getting their attention. She pointed at Grunt. "You will be dead," she turned the finger to Naruto, "and you'll be coming with us." The shinobi was unimpressed. "You tried that before. You lost your eye. You caught me by surprise. I assure you that will not happen now. The tribe wants their property back and I intend to deliver you to them," she promised. Even though she was speaking one thing, her eye was saying something. Naruto had the cold feeling that if she got hold of him, he would be delivered to the tribe, just not in a clean state. But even if he hadn't gotten that feeling, her words prompted him to reply. "I'm not their property." He was counting the numbers with his eyes as he spoke. There were too many to make clones a viable option, especially with guns in hand. The awkwardness would cause a delay, and that would cost them. She smiled a cruel smile at him, and raised her own weapon. This says differently, and so did they. She pointed the weapon back at the people behind her. It was much bigger than the team on Omega. She must have thought that the advantage would be with her if she swelled the numbers. She's not wrong, he conceded. If he had his full powers, his Tengu Jutsu or the Fox's chakra would be able to handle them. But he did not have them at his command, and he wasn't about to try and see if they were at the moment. Other options would have to be taken. They were most likely expecting him to try and attack them with a jutsu and would be prepared to counter that. But he knew that a battle here would not be in his favor. However, he wasn't the same 12-year-old kid who rushed straight into danger whilst not giving a damn about the consequences. A different tactic would have to be taken here, one that he was perfectly fine with doing. The only problem he had would be his student. He was really hoping that he wouldn't have to drag Grunt away. You're right, he told the huntress, lowering his guns. They do say that. He refused to say the exact words. Glad you recognize that, she said with a grin that promised sadistic things to occur. But I've got something that says otherwise. All weapons were up and pointing at them. Try a jutsu and I'll make sure you're conscious long enough to watch me kill each and every one you cherish, she promised him. Then I'll make you suffer for even daring to try to cast one. He refused to let that send a shiver down his spine. Instead he chose to snort in derision. You're clueless. Shinobi aren't one-trick ponies. Oh, I am well aware of that. We have every way of countering your actions covered. There's no chance of escape. First, I wouldn't be sure of that boast. Second, you shouldn't have said that, he grinned back at her, a feral one to her sadistic. You just gave me an incentive. His hands whipped out, releasing what he had been holding. The guns opened fire instantaneously, all aiming for the objects flying at them, a pair of two small orbs. It didn't take long for them to be utterly destroyed. But that was what Naruto had been counting on. While he had been talking, he had holstered his guns and pulled out smoke bombs from the pouches in the same motion. When the smoke appeared, making a cloud between them and him, he turned to Grunt. We're leaving. What? Grunt asked, surprised. Why? We're outnumbered here, Grunt. We came here to stall, not fight. We need to make sure that we get the information in the base and get out with everything intact. His student frowned. Clearly, he didn't like the idea. I don't want to hear it, Grunt. We are leaving now. He walked quickly over, placed a firm hand on the Krogan's shoulder, turned him to the complex, and started pushing him towards it. It didn't take long for him to shrug off the hand. All right, I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. Glad to hear it. Now move. At that, their quick walk turned into a run. Jacob! He shouted into the calm. Commander? Replied Jacob. Tell me that you found the lab already? I think we're about a minute away. You need to move it and fast. Didn't I say Quan Misley could use her knife? He remembered saying that. This is us moving with her knife out, sir. What the? A surprised voice said loudly behind him. What happened? Where'd they go? Don't just stand there. The huntress shouted. Start shooting. At what? Someone dared to ask her. Commander, is something happening? Jacob asked Naruto. All he heard was the single shot being fired. Does anyone else want to question my orders? There was silence. Then shoot. The air came alive with an orchestra of gunfire and the bullets that came with them. Naruto could feel his shields taking the hits that made contact, but most didn't hit. It was still enough for him to up his speed. The tribes showed up with the huntress in the lead. He told Jacob over the sound of gunfire, keeping his eyes focused on the entrance and on Grunt. Get to that lab, Jacob, now. We're working on it. Work faster. He stopped the call just as he went through the entrance. With Grunt inside too, they got the entrance close just as the tribe force was coming out of the smokescreen, and at them with guns still shooting. That was close, he thought to himself, taking a moment to breathe. They're going to get that door open easily, Saiken told him. You don't have the skill to keep it shut. I'm aware of that. He was also aware of the fact that the entrance lobby was also full with women. They hadn't gotten far enough into the complex to hide or thought that this was far enough to protect them. Run, he said to them all. Hide deeper in the complex. He was lucky that they thought he was some kind of deity and obeyed his command. They scattered into the corridors almost as soon he finished the first word. Now what? Asked Grunt. Don't know, still thinking, he replied. Shouldn't you have done that before we came in here? I think better on my feet and on the fly. A squealing sound started up on the other side of the door and was rapidly getting louder. That would be them starting on the door. Shikaka pointed out the obvious. Start thinking. He started looking around the room, trying to find something that would help him out. His first idea was shot down ironically because he couldn't shoot the lights. They were guarded by interlocking steel bars thick enough to block a good number of bullets. There was also the fact that he didn't know if there were too many people for it to be effective. He had to come up with something else, and time was not on his side. You mind if I suggest something? Kurama asked him. Suggest away, he replied. He would be glad for an idea. Have you considered a variation on the suicide wagon, just without the wagon? He had used the suicide wagon so many times that it sounded rather stupid to do it without the wagon. But it was a viable idea and one he would gladly take. It would be a risk not knowing how many clones he could produce. But he was going to have to try. Tajukage Bunshin no Jutsu! He cried out. The smoke filled the lobby, and it was also filled with clones of him. Nothing seemed to have happened to him for it. Geez, I was worrying for nothing. Maybe he should try out his other jutsu when he had the time. Whoa, Grunt said as he looked at the number of clones in the lobby. There were so many, all he could really see was the sea of black armor with orange highlights and blonde hair. Yeah, I can do this, Naruto told him. Will I? I guess we'll find out. It would be something to find out if his student could use the jutsu or some version of it. It would also be a little scary too, but that was why he was training Grunt, and not just letting him wander around doing nothing about his power. Now what? He asked. Are we going to fight now? No. EDI, he said through the comm. Send him the directions to the lab. Understood, Commander, she replied. Find Jacob and Quanmisley. Make sure they get out fine, he told his student. What about you? I'm going to do something stupid. Lead them on a grand merry chase. If he did that, they wouldn't focus on his teammates. No, they'd be focused on you, Sun pointed out. And correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that what we're trying to avoid? You're not wrong, but I don't see any way else that'll keep them busy, he told the Yambi. This is stupid. You got a better idea? The door broke open and the tribe poured in, guns firing away. Too late, he remarked before shouting in a loud voice, Charge! Not one of his tenants made a comment as his clones swarmed the tribe. When they did, Grunt went left and he went right, vanishing into different corridors. It only took him 2 minutes to realize that running down a corridor filled with women that seemed to have less sense in their heads than a dog chasing a bone wasn't a good idea. His run quickly turned into stop and go, with a lot of shoving mixed in. Add in the sounds of fighting and guns behind him with a good healthy dose of confused voices, and his own was lost in the soup. Come on, move! He shouted as he pushed aside another woman, his voice drowning in the others. Behind him, he could hear voices from the lobby mixing together. Clone, here I, find, this way. A much clearer voice shouted. He went this way. I can see him, after him. The huntress's voice roared. Damn it, this is taking too long. Naruto mentally groused. It was like moving through 2 weeks old ramen. The walls, you moron, said Kurama. Take to the walls. I do that, they'll see me too easily and start shooting. I need to lengthen this chase, not keep it short. Figure something out because at the rate you're going, they're going to catch up quickly. Gunshots roared from behind. Scratch that, they're going to catch up now. I know, I heard. He didn't need to look back to figure out that they had started shooting into the corridor. All he needed to hear was the sound of the guns firing and the women screaming their death cries or trying to plead for their lives. So what are you going to do? The gunshots went into the crowd, overriding the women's pleas for mercy. Oddly enough, it didn't sound like everyone in the tribe was following through. Whoa, hold on. What the hell are you doing? Getting to him, any way I can. These are innocents. No such thing, kid. Get over it. Shit! Naruto swore before making the choice to leap from the floor to the wall. He started running as soon as his feet made contact, but they saw him instantly. There he is! Shoot! Shoot him down! You're going to get shot very easily this way, Isabu pointed out to the blonde. It was only his speed that was keeping himself safe, and that could easily be caught onto. I know. I've got an idea. Care to share? A little busy here, just watch. He suddenly leapt to the other wall and kept running. After 10 steps, he jumped again. 5 more steps and he jumped to the ceiling, running on all fours, using a method Kiba had showed him a few times. It was a way to stay low while also keeping speed and traction constant, although he wasn't sure if it had ever been done on a ceiling. That wasn't important. He had to keep running. He swung himself back down to the wall. He heard the confused shots behind him, hitting the spots he had been in a mere second or two afterwards. They had no idea what he was doing and it showed with surprise in their voices. What the fuck? Shoot, you idiots! He's getting away. He's too far away, and he's hopping around like a monkey. Shoot him down then. Get closer. Shoot through the women. That seemed to be enough of a command to make them turn their full attention on the women in the corridors. Naruto had thought that they all had been shooting at the women, but it turned out that he was wrong. The rate of gunfire ringing in his ears was faster and mixed in perfectly, too perfectly, with the louder screams of the women. Damn it! Damn it! Damn them all to Kami so they may be judged! He raged silently. This shouldn't have to happen. But he had to focus on making sure that he got out, and he would have to do what he had to do to make sure that it happened. That didn't mean he could just deafen his hearing to the sounds behind him. At least you didn't give a promise to protect them, Koko pointed out to him. If that had happened, you'd really be in trouble. That doesn't give me any comfort, he replied. It was just like the way all over again. He was certain that he would have nightmares about this now. Focus, Gaki, Kurama ordered him with a bark. His eyes snapped back up at that order, and he saw where he was going. The corridor split off 3 ways up ahead. He could go into one of them. But that would not solve his problem. He needed to lower the numbers against him. Luckily, he had an idea. He leapt the ceiling again, ran for about 20 paces, and then fell right down to the ground, landing in a crouch. What are you doing? Saiken asked. Kege Bunshin no Jutsu, he said quietly, creating 3 clones. They stood up and pushed their way out of the women while he stayed down and hidden in the legs. He just hoped that what he was planning would work, even if it did make him a bit sick. There he goes. Wait, what? There were 3 of them. Split up and go after them. They don't disappoint, he remarked to himself while he started to flatten himself against the ground. Bodies were falling down all around him, all dead. Some actually fell on him, obscuring him from actual sight, which was what he was hoping for. The small piece of the room he could still see underneath them began to darken enough to make him wish that he had a flashlight if it was any other kind of situation. The guns were still firing and they were getting closer. Don't panic, he told himself. Keep calm, wait. If he had to move too soon, they would find him. The guns still kept coming. So did the sound of their feet, a mash of different sounds of thunder. Yet he did not move. Closer they came, but he did not move. They were right next to him, but still he did not move. He couldn't see them, but he could still hear them. Split up. You lot, take the left. You, go up the center. You take the right, screamed the huntress. You 3, stay behind and make sure he doesn't double back. Sir, the tribe replied as one. The thunder left just as quickly as they had come, but he still did not move. It was only when he could barely hear the thunder that he moved, rising up out of the bodies like a ghost coming out of a grave. He pulled out a pair of kunai when he saw a pair of Turians standing there. They only heard the bodies shifting before they felt sharp piercing pain in their back of their necks and falling into darkness. Naruto managed to use the kunai to stop their fall just enough to make sure they didn't hit the ground loud. He made 2 new clones. They grabbed hold of the bodies and stuffed them into the piles of corpses before transforming themselves into the Turians. EDI, he said while the clones checked themselves over. Yes, Commander? Said EDI back. Look over the schematics and find a way that'll lead me and the rest of the team to a place the shuttle can land at. We need to get off this rock. Scanning now, she replied. It didn't take her long to find a way. She sent it to him in the form of a map of the complex with his path highlighted in red, engulfing his entire visor for a second before minimizing down to the right side. It also came with radar, showing him enemy locations. Send that to Jacob's squad, he told her. He looked at the path. It took him right down the center path, and that's where he started running. His only hope was the huntress didn't go down that way. I have already done so. Good. Get that shuttle down here ASAP. I am contacting the shuttle now. He should be at the position quickly. He switched the call as he started going up the side of the wall again. Jacob, you have the location to get to? Yeah, we do, he answered. Is Grunt with you? He is. I'm here, Grunt chimed in on the conversation. Thank you, Grunt. Have you guys found anything? We might have found something. Quan Misley is downloading it now. Hurry up and get to the location. I don't know if they are coming after you too or not. I'm on my way there now. How do you plan on doing that? Shikaka asked him as he disconnected the call and jumped onto the ceiling. Run like hell and hope they don't catch me, he replied, keeping his pace steady. And you really think that's going to work? I've got a track record to back it up. All he had to do was try to stay mostly out of sight, and he would get there in relative safety. Silence would be key here, and that meant he wouldn't be able to use the guns. They would make too much noise. Old school would have to be the way here. It's a good thing that I'm an old hand at old school. Really? Asked the fox. You really had to make that pun? He didn't answer, keeping his eyes focused on where he was going while his hands reached for more kunai. He held them in between his knuckles, ready to slash at anything he directed them to. As he ran, he started seeing more dead bodies on the floor. All of them were women. The sight of them made him angry. They should pay for this. Then make them, Sun urged him with a growl. He can't, Isabu protested. He has to get out. Maybe he can vent a little, Gyuki suggested. Naruto, take a look at your radar. Yeah, I see them, he replied. The radar was showing that he was coming up rapidly on the group that came this way. He saw enough bodies to make the would-be fight time-consuming. That doesn't matter, the Yambi told him. It does matter, Saiken argued. He has to get out. The slug had the point, but that didn't mean he wanted to listen to it. If anything, more than else, he wanted to stop and render them limb from limb. If they wanted to make a portrait of dead bodies, he would gladly make their blood an accent to the entire thing. But Saiken had a point, and so did Isabu. Now was not the time for a straight-out fight. So what's the plan? Komiya asked him. I'm not going to fight them, he answered. You should, Sun growled. There's no time. It's going to be a hit and run, one they don't see coming. I hope that's the case, Kurama said, because you're about to be right on top of them. He saw them just up ahead. He kept his pace steady. He was literally on top of them when they turned to find the source of noise. All any of them was a yelp what the? Before he swung his kunai claws, aiming right at their faces. Blood flew off the tips and edges as he broke past the visors and dug into their faces. Once he felt flesh, he pulled hard. He didn't pay attention to which way he pulled, only that the kunai followed his pull. It all happened as quickly as he could breathe. He didn't stop to look back at his handiwork, to hear their screams or moans of pain. He just kept moving until the map told him to go right, which he did. The twists, turns, and running ambushes were beginning to blur together when the complex started shaking. The first one was barely recognizable, not enough to make him even lose his step. The next one was much bigger. It rocked everything in his sight that he lost focus and fell to the ground. Ow! He bit out as he hit the floor. What the hell was that? He demanded as he got back up and kept running, turning on the comm. Did everyone else feel that? Yeah, we did, Grunt replied. What the fuck was it? I don't know. We do, Joker spoke. What was it? The tribe shuttle started dropping ordnance on the complex. They're doing freaking bombing runs. As if to emphasize his words, another shake happened. Naruto fell again but got back up. Is this place going to hold up? No, EDI's voice told him. It is outdated and the defense systems are barely online. We need to get out. He looked at the map. He could see the spot where the shuttle was just at the edge. I'm almost at the location. Jacob, where's your team? We're almost there too. Sir, we have to consider the women. We can't, sir, he said in loud protest. We can't, Jacob, the blonde repeated himself. There are too many of them and the shuttle can't afford to do multiple pickup runs. We have to leave them behind. He hated saying that. He had heard those words and said them himself too many times during the war. Understood, sir, the reply came in a tight voice. The call ended on that note. He swung to the left and tried to keep his pace steady as another shaking happened. The path was almost at the end. He could see the exit in front of him, a door at the corridor's end. He pushed his speed up, trying to outrun the complex's shaking. Chunks of the ceiling were starting to fall. They were getting close. He was at the exit, just about to see past the light, when the shot rang out and landed an inch above where his hand held the exit's edge. He stopped and looked back at the huntress. You're persistent, he remarked. You're coming with me, she told him. No, I'm not. He threw the kunai at her and followed it up with a round of smoke bombs. She was lost in the smoke cloud. He turned and ran out, finding himself in a ruined miniature space dock. But the shuttle wasn't there. EDI, where the fuck is the shuttle? He shouted into the comm. The sounds of ordnance falling and exploding filled his ears now, a whole new cacophony. It is inbound right now, she replied, cool and calm. Jacob and the others? He asked, looking around and seeing nothing. A sharp, familiar sound entered the cacophony. He looked up and saw the shuttle come flying down from the sky to the dock. As it came down to land on the single remaining pad, the door on the other side opened and the rest of his team came out in a run. Never mind. He disconnected the call and raced over to meet them at the pad. Are they following you? There were a few, but we took care of them, Grunt told him, grinning proudly. The shuttle came to a hovering stop over the pad and the hatch opened. Get in! The pilot shouted over the speakers. Naruto was last in when the tribe came pouring out onto the dock. Go, go, go! He shouted to the pilot while he drew his guns and started shooting. He wasn't aiming for anything in particular, just at the masses. The katon bullets set the bodies afire, but too few too late. He could see the huntress coming in through the middle. The shuttle lifted up into the air and he still kept shooting. He kept shooting until he could barely see them. Naruto, your bullets aren't doing anything now, Matatabi told him. You might as well stop. He did, putting the guns away. Close the hatch. He called to the pilot as he stepped back inside proper. He sat down in one of the seats and grabbed onto the nearby handrail. The hatch closed with a quiet hiss. Hold on, the pilot told them. This is going to get tricky. The shuttle suddenly swerved into a barrel roll. Naruto was glad that he grabbed the rail. Location, the Normandy. The flight back to the ship had been shaky, literally since the tribe shuttles started coming after them. But once they got back to the ship, Joker was able to give them the slip. One low-ranked right-on jutsu from the Churka cannon and the tribe ship was paralyzed, which meant they were out of the system before they could get it started. When the ship was in the clear, everyone relaxed a little. Naruto went to his quarters and changed out of the armor before going to find Jacob. He found him in the conference room, but the table was lowered into the floor and he stood in what looked like a beam of light. What do you mean it wasn't you? He asked. What's going on? Naruto asked. The better question is, who is he talking to? Koko said. One way to find that out, he replied before walking up to the beam and stepping through. He found himself in the elusive man's office, standing before the man himself. Jacob, if I had leaked the information about the Jernsback, I would be smiling at your resolution of the situation, he spoke. I am not smiling. His face was neutral, even blank. You had to have known. I had no more reason to believe that your father was alive than you did. But I'm happy to know the situation is behind you. Naruto didn't say anything, choosing to watch rather than speaking. Jacob lost some of the anger on his face. Fine, he said. You didn't forward it. So who did? I did, Miranda answered as she too stepped into the beam. Surprise, surprise, Naruto finally chose the moment to speak, completely unsurprised. She didn't answer him, choosing to look at Jacob. It was hardly classified. Just obscured, she told him. Her voice softened a little when she kept speaking. There was a time when it mattered to you. Sending this along seemed like keeping an old promise. I keep my promises. He didn't have anything to say to that. But the elusive man did. Miranda, we'll discuss your liberal interpretation of security protocol in private. Uzumaki. Jacob. He waved his hand in a brief gesture, and he vanished into nothing. The three of them stood there in the conference room. Miranda gave Jacob one look, still with that little bit of softness on her face. But then it vanished, and she left. What was that about? Sun wondered. You didn't know this was Miranda? Naruto asked Jacob. No, he said with a quick shake of his head. She's got a good memory. Selective, but good. I haven't thought about those days in a long time. Can't figure which promise she meant, though. Not sure I really want to know. She requires a better man than I, so there was something there to begin with. This is interesting, Shikaka remarked. This is very interesting. Don't get any ideas, Isaba warned him. Or not a man at all, Naruto remarked, mostly to himself as he thought about Ruko and Miranda. What was that? Jacob asked him, not really catching all of he said. It's nothing, he said, shrugging it off. In spite of everything that happened, are you good? He frowned at the question, but not at him. I don't care whether Captain Taylor is alive or dead right now. It doesn't change who I am or what I know. I've already mourned the man he used to be. I guess he was a good enough father that even he can't screw up what he taught me. That's good to hear. His face took on a pained look. I just wish that there was something that we could have done for the women on the complex. We shouldn't have left them like that. We didn't have a choice, Jacob, Naruto told him. If we had died, it all would have been pointless. I know that, but still. He trailed off again. Would you stop leading him on and just tell him already? Kurama told the blonde. We get enough pity parties from you. I don't have pity parties, he said in slight protest. Just get on with it. All right, pushy much? He asked rhetorically before speaking to Jacob again. Look, we didn't have a choice then, but we do now, and I've already made it. What do you mean? He asked with a confused and curious look. I made a call to someone I know and had him get into contact with that religious sect the Niners are all angry at. You mean the Travelers of the Road? Yeah, them, he said with a small shrug whilst mentally filing the name away. I told the guy to send them to the planet and see if there were any women still living. If they were, they would be taken somewhere safe so they can recover. If they were dead, they would be buried. Jacob's face broke out an expression of relief. It didn't stop there, flowing down his entire body. Thank you, he said to the blonde with heavy gratitude. Don't thank me, thank the travelers. I will do that. A thought came to him that tainted his relief. What about my father? That, I had specific orders for them. If he's dead, leave him where he is. If he's alive, slit his throat. It was no less than that man deserved, and they both knew it. Jacob agreed with what he said with a silent nod. But then he had a thought. Despite what he did, he may have had a point about having the women's tubes tied. No child should have been born and raised on that planet. Perhaps, but it was still wrong. The information gleaned from the complex hadn't been much, and most of it was outdated by they already had. But in that outdatedness lay a grain of something to be followed. They did have something on the inhibitors and a vague remark about the technician needing more materials that could only be found on a base on the other side of the galaxy, and complaining about it would take a week to get them. It wasn't much, but it was enough to work. They had to move fast since the huntress was still on their tail. In the end, it was Eric who came up with the plan. As he put it, find every base a week away from the plan and hit them. It will make them panic and give us a chance to rid ourselves of any additional headaches. We are bound to hit the right one sooner or later. No one really had an argument against that plan. The only wrinkle that Miranda saw in it was that it would no doubt attract the attention of the huntress, and therefore getting out will probably become a problem. A serious one if she was lying in wait. Ruko's reply to that was, you should take that up with Joker. See what he thinks about it. She did. Joker saw it as a challenge and an incentive. That was how they spent the last 3 weeks, tracking down each base that they knew of and hitting it. The initial hunt turned out to be longer when the information they took revealed addition bases in that sector of the galaxy. The huntress did find them more than a few times, and it was fairly close on more than one occasion. In fact, the team was only able to get out 2 of those situations because of a malfunctioning door. Some people would have given up, but Naruto never did. Every piece of information found was the chance to hit paid dirt. Every new base discovered was an incentive to keep on going. And Eric was right. Sooner or later they were bound to hit the right one. That was how they found themselves on a desert planet trying to pry open the entrance to a tribe complex. This is taking too long, Zaid growled, sweating under the heat. Just rig it to blow already. The last time we did that, the doors locked down tighter and the huntress almost caught us, Jacob told him. They were standing close to one another watching Gurus trying to hack the door open with no success. We only got out of that one when Eric sliced off her fingers on her left hand. Yes, unfortunately, that did not slow her down, Eric remarked from where he stood off to the right of Zaid, leaning on his broadaxe. It was too hot for his helmet, so he hung it on his belt. That didn't stop the sweat from pouring down his face. How much longer are we going to have to wait? Zaid asked Gurus loudly. A lot longer if you keep yelling at me. He shouted back, not bothered to turn his head from his kneeling position in front of the door. Gah, I wish Grunt was here, then next time don't get my student shot. Naruto told him, glaring at him. You're the reason he's in the medical bay making sure he doesn't lose his arm. He had started making a point of rotating out who went down to the bases so that they wouldn't be injured all at the same time. It should have been Grunt on this desert planet now, but Zaid had purposely whipped him into a frenzy. He was now making it a point that they were never together again. What made it worse that Zaid was unapologetic about it. He turned back to the Turian at the door. Gurus? He asked. I know, Naruto, I know. I'm working on it, Gurus snapped at him. Look, I'm not at Tali's level for this kind of thing. We have no idea what they're doing behind that door, Gurus. For all they knew, the base's personnel had heard of the attacks and were making sure they couldn't get any of the information they were looking for. If that was the case, time was not on their side. Then why don't you do something about this? Sun asked him. You're right, he admitted. Gurus, step back, he ordered. Miranda, Ruko, tear that door off, he told the both of them standing behind him. What, both of us? Ruko asked, sounding a little more than insulted. Better safe than sorry, he told her. You have no faith in me? Could you please stop arguing with him and help me open the door? Miranda asked rhetorically as she walked past him to stand in front of the door. She would have snarled at her back if Naruto hadn't said Ruko. She stifled the snarl and went with a growl instead. Fine, I'll help. She stomped past him and took up her position right next to Miranda. The two of them raised their hands and flared their biotics. Blue and red wavered and flickered against one another but never mixed. Miranda kept her face in an expressionless mask while Ruko morphed hers into a growl, peeling her lips back to bare her teeth. Even though their biotics were colored different, and their faces showed different emotions, they moved at the same time. They threw their arm out, hands clenched into claws, and then pulled in opposite directions. Their biotics flew out at the doors, held onto one each, and followed their pull. The doors opened with a sound that sounded like the gears themselves were being torn out of their places, echoing out into the empty air. But the entrance was opened. There, Ruko declared. Thanks, her brother told her. Still could have done it myself, she groused as he passed her, and she followed, her hand going for the pistol at her belt. You could have, and we would have had one bone-dead tired biotic instead of two slightly tired biotics. Do you have no faith in me, at all? She asked him as they entered the base. They walked into the lobby room they had found in every tribal base. Like the majority of them, this one was clean, almost sterile-like, and empty. The only thing they heard was the alarm going off over their heads. Awooga, awooga, awooga. Normally, Naruto would have started complaining about how or why did the tribe had the same kind of annoying alarm the Akatsuki had, but after the fifth planet, everyone else told him to shut up about it. So he chose focus on his conversation. I already told you, better safe than sorry, she snorted. Fuck both of those ideas, I'd rather not. Besides, you and Miranda work well together. It might have sounded casual and not really thought through, but he said it deliberately. She had the effect he had wanted to see. What? She hissed out, barely able to keep her voice from screaming out loud. No, I don't. What I saw says otherwise. You're fucking. Shush, he said. You don't shush me, not after that. She told him. Ruko, deal with this later, he said back, his eyes watching for possible threats. One of the tribe's favorite tactics was to leap out of doorways and try to attack them unawares. But since they were always watching for stuff like that, it didn't really work all the time. Oh yeah, we're definitely talking about this later, she promised. Not me, you and Miranda. Why did he keep bringing that up? There's nothing to talk about between us. She was getting angrier every time she denied it. If she was a less violent kind of person, it might have been a little cute. But it wasn't, and she wasn't either. She was more likely to punch someone through something when she was angry. Did you do this on purpose so she could turn that anger on the tribe? Shikaka asked him. Unlike Grunt, she knew how to direct the anger. No, but good idea, he told the Tanuki. Thank you, I try, he preened, making the other Biju groan. If you're going to be angry about something, direct it at the tribe, the shinobi told his sister. Fine, I'll do that. She told him with the same angry whisper she had been using since the start of the conversation. She tore her gaze from the back of his head and looked around for people to shoot at. But all she saw was an empty room. Fuck, keep it down, Miranda reprimanded her at her outburst. We don't want to get caught in an ambush. She just glared at the brunette in response. Miranda didn't say anything or ask what the look was for, choosing to stare back impassively. It just made the blonde glare harder at her. You all know the drill, Naruto said to the team, ignoring the stare of the women. Eric, you got the short stick, you're on guard duty. It is just as well, he replied, lowering his axe's head to the ground. I am not really suited for really confined areas. Yeah, we got that when you blew that corridor apart, Zaid remarked with a snort. The disgraced Einherjar had nothing to say in reply. It had been a risky move and one that didn't pay off. He knew that and accepted the blame for it. Gurus, Miranda, you're with me, the shinobi continued, ignoring the short conversation. Jacob, Zaid, Ruko, take the left corridor. Since the layout of the base complex didn't really change from base to base, they knew that there was only two places information could be stored, the command office and the lab. Since they figured that out, two teams were always formed to go one each. They split up, leaving Eric there in the lobby. The corridor was just the same as the others they had seen. And it didn't take for the security for the base to arrive and try to attack from out of a side corridor. Miranda sent them flying back with a biotic push. Gurus picked them off while they were still airborne, and Naruto finished off the survivors. It took a minute and a half tops. You think they would come with a new tactic by now, Gurus said as he lowered his rifle and they started walking down the corridor once more. Some have put up a fight, Miranda reminded him. She was thinking of the base 3 planets ago where they had been stuck in a mess hall for 10 minutes trying to kill one group of tribe security. They had dug in with makeshift barricades. It had been annoying to deal with, especially when Ruko's team had finished before hers. The blonde had been insufferable throughout the next day. I know, but the rest of them just seemed to repeat the same old thing. I think that the bases don't really communicate with each other. We wouldn't want them to, she said as they turned the corner. If the map they knew of tribe bases was the same for here, one of the bunk rooms would be up ahead. If they could, they would have advance warning, and having advance warning would not be so good for us, Naruto finished for her. I get that, the Turian told them both. I'm just saying that they need to figure out some new things. Trying the usual tactics again and again hoping for a different outcome is a little stupid, and you've also managed to define insanity in the same sentence. Nice going, Gurus. He said it with a slightly mocking tone of humor. Thank you, I tried the Turian with the same tone, only with gratitude. He smiled a little, and even though he had the helmet on, He knew the blonde was smiling too. Miranda quietly rolled her eyes. Whenever the two of them were put on the same team in the past few weeks, they were always like this. They kept it in small doses so it was bearable, and were able to focus on what was at hand. She just wished that they could keep their attention on the mission fully instead of joking around with their words. But unlike Ruko, she knew when her opinion didn't matter. They came to the corridor's end and saw the locked door. They fell silent and turned serious. Naruto and Miranda pressed their backs against the walls while Geras knelt down beside the door and turned on his Omni tool. Opening this door didn't take as long as the entrance, and less hard too. The door opened and they all pointed their guns into the room. It was dark, completely and utterly black. They couldn't see into it, let alone to the other side. They didn't move, not even to activate flashlights. They would give the people in the room a place to shoot. They knew that there were people in there. It was a question of how many there. Do you see them? Miranda asked Naruto quietly. Oh yeah, I see them, he replied, seeing the room through night vision on his helmet, truly a useful thing. They've got the beds pushed to the ground to form barricades and are hiding behind them. It looks like they were hoping to ambush us again. Well, at least they're trying something else, Geras remarked. I'll handle this one. He took a step forward into the room. You guys can wait outside, sir, Miranda started to say. You sure? Asked Geras, cutting her off. Yeah, I'll be fine. They're the ones who made the mistake anyway, he said loudly into the room. No one started shooting, but there was that sense of an anger beginning to emit in the air. All right, the Turian conceded, walking back out of the room and pushing Miranda out the same way with a firm hand. She might have struggled, but the door closed before she could, so there was no point. So instead she just turned her head to look at him. Why would you do that? Because he'll be fine, he answered. They did give him the advantage. She didn't ask what he meant by that. It would have implied that she was blind and dumb. So instead, she chose to wait and listened. It didn't take long for her to hear the bullets being fired, the kunai cutting through armor and flesh, and the screaming to start. Where is he? Where is he? What, Arda? They heard a body fall to the ground. Son of a bitch, who was that? 2 more bodies fell. Who was that? I don't know. I can't see. The voice was silenced by a gunshot. No! No! That one died by gunshot too. Shoot him! Shoot him! Shoot him! I can't see him! Where is he? The lights, someone turn on the damn. H. The person screaming was followed by a kunai cutting through flesh, probably leaving a mess. Where's the switch? The two outside started hearing different sounds. Sounds like he's breaking the bones, Geras commented as he kept listening to the massacre. What does that imply? Miranda asked him. A loud scream reverberated beyond the door, full of fear and terror, yet they didn't even flinch at the sound of it. It died off when they heard a gunshot. They could tell it was Naruto's, since his were the shots that were measured and precise compared to the others, which sounded wild and erratic. I have no idea. You made it sound like you've seen him do this kind of thing before. Not directly. I don't think he lets anyone see what he does directly. There were 2 streams of gunfire going off loudly, only to be suddenly silenced by 2 gunshots. But you have seen something like this before? Not seen, but I heard it over the radio. Probably more too disturbing to hear it than see it happen, he commented. Stay away. Stay away. Where is he? He's, case in point, he said, looking at the door. What happened the last time? Miranda asked. Some idiotic matriarch decided to kidnap someone Naruto knew just after Vermeer. He was not in a good mood when that went down and promptly took out on the ship the matriarch was on. Which matriarch was this? Moria Axia. Once she heard that name, she knew what it was he was talking about. Ah, the Hanabi Hyuga situation, she said. He looked at her, mild surprise in his eyes. You know. Of course you know. Of course, she agreed. I was the one who passed it on to the elusive man's attention, and he passed it on to Naruto. You should probably tell him that. It might get you some points from him. I'm not in this kind of war for the points. She was assuming he was referring to respect but didn't push it any further. What happened to the matriarch? There have been no sightings of her since. He shrugged indifferently. I don't know. But from what little I knew about her, she didn't really like Naruto, and it came back to bite her in the ass. If I had to guess, he got to her first. She eyed him suspiciously. Out of the entire team, he was the only one still on good terms with the commander. It was possible that he was covering for Naruto, but she asked him directly. It was like he would shut her down without even thinking about it. No, she would have to be subtle and careful about this one. That's a shame. The Akatsuki would have paid a handsome price to get her. She could have been a fountain of information on the tribe. I doubt Naruto would have paid it. You do realize that when the elusive man told him that they were the Akatsuki, he formed a negative opinion about the entire organization. He would have killed the matriarch just to spite you. 2 gunshots barked out along with a bone snapping and 3 more bodies thumped to the ground. We are not the same Akatsuki, she told him. He knows that now. The door opened and Naruto was there. Shall we? He asked. It was still dark in the room beyond. Are they all dead? Miranda asked him. Yes. You might want to be a little careful with your steps. Things are going to be a bit slippery on the floor. They followed him in. There was a faint light on the other side of the room, showing another way out. There were a lot of slippery things on the floor, mostly blood but some other kinds of stuff. A person with a weaker stomach might have lost it with feeling the kinds of things with their feet, more so if they could see what had happened. Gurus had seen his fair share of massacres and Miranda was made of sterner stuff, but even they wondered what the place looked like now. Is there a light switch? Gurus asked the blonde. There should be. I didn't actively look for it, he answered. Why? Do you want to see it? A little bit. I mean, we heard it. No, let's just move on, Miranda said. All right, Naruto said, completely fine with it. It's a good thing, too, Koko remarked. You were vicious, I know. That had been the idea. Jacob, how are things over on your end? Miranda spoke into the calm as they left the room into another corridor. They would follow it to the far left corridor, and then head north to find their area of interest. They are coming along fine, Jacob replied, speaking to all 3 of them. We've encountered the usual resistance. Eric, anything your way? Asked Naruto to the Einherjar. No, nothing, Eric answered. Everything is fine. They followed their path, encountering no resistance, and turning the corner they needed to turn. As he did, the first thing Naruto saw was the satisfied look of the Solarian standing there. The second thing he saw were the 2 turrets he stood behind, already following him. Back, back, he warned the others, stepping back into the corridor just as the turrets opened fire. The bullets whizzed right through the space he had been just moments before. This is new, Gurus remarked over the bullets. It's definitely a new kind of turret, the blonde told him. It looks like it has some better protection around the gun and the stand. Anything else? Asked Miranda. I didn't see any. You want to take a look? No, we can scavenge the remains later. We'll just need to destroy them. Is there anyone in the corridor? Gurus asked. Only the Solarian standing behind them, Naruto said. He must have been hoping to catch them unawares with the turrets. Not a bad idea, but not a good one either. All right, I'll take care of him. He brought his rifle up closer to his chest so he could aim it better. I will handle the turrets, Miranda declared, holstering her weapon but keeping her arms at the ready. Since they had already those called, there was only one thing left for the shinobi. I guess I'm the distraction, he said in slight resignation as he put his guns in their holsters. On my mark, 3, 2, 1. He bolted out of the corridor, to the wall, and then up it. The bullets followed in his wake, trying to catch him but failing. In their mindless howl, he heard the single bark of Gursa's rifle and the sudden pressure of Miranda's biotics pressing against him for a brief moment. They passed, and he stopped on the ceiling. The Solarian was dead but the turrets had only been moved, stunning them for a brief moment. Well, that didn't work, he remarked quietly. What's the idea now? Matatabi asked. They soon turned their barrels up at him. How about not getting shot? Suggested Komiai. That's a good idea. You heard them, Naruto, Gyuki told him. He didn't reply, instead choosing to run across the ceiling, past the turrets, and falling down to the ground behind them. Pulling out a kunai, he severed their power cords with a single swing. They died with no sound. He stood up while Miranda and Gurus came out. Undamaged, for the most part, he told Miranda. I'll let the pickup team know about this, she replied. She took a moment to look at them. This seems to be made of tougher biotic material than we've found previously. They're developing new tech. That's not surprising, Gurus remarked as he stepped over them. He didn't get it exactly right and knocked the left down to the ground. She winced a little at the sound of it falling. Please careful, Mr. Vicarian. Whoops, he said without much apology. I am being serious here. That sound could bring the entire security force down on our heads. If there are any left, he remarked. She resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Let's just keep moving. She walked over to them, stepping over the turrets as well. Naruto took the lead again, taking the time to contact the other team. Jacob, be on the lookout for a new kind of turret. We don't know the specifics of them yet, but they are more resistant to biotics. Acknowledged, Commander, Jacob replied. That was all he said before Ruko took over. Hey, did the cheerleader try to move them and fail or something? Or something, Naruto chose to answer carefully, fully aware that Miranda was watching him and listening in on the conversation, but his sister took it another way. Ha! She couldn't even budge them, could she? Oh, that is rich. Tell her to watch while I knock each one I see down, and how would I be able to do that if we are nowhere near each other? Miranda asked, finally choosing to join the conversation. He chose to stop the fight before it could even start. Ruko, she did move them a little bit, but let it go for now. Stay focused on what we're doing here. If you come across any of the turrets, be careful, alright? He heard an exasperated sound from the other end of the comm and a fine, before the call was ended. He looked over at Miranda, and she didn't say anything. He wasn't sure what that meant, but he would take it. When they did finally find their target, it turned out to be the lab. They keep switching these up, Grunt remarked as they entered the area, the barrel of his gun still smoking. The lab looked like the others they had found, large enough to be a bedroom, colored in a sterile white, and enough equipment to make a Solarian happy. Jacob, we've got the lab, Miranda said into the comm while the door closed behind them. Got it, he replied. We're still on the way to the command office. We've encountered tougher resistance than expected. Says you, shouted Ruko. Has she been causing trouble? She asked. No, not really, Jacob answered. She's been helping us along. You're welcome. Eric, anything on your end? Asked Naruto. No, all is calm, the Einherjar answered. It has been so since you left. I have taken to reading. Reading at post? That's practically an invitation to have someone sneak past you, Sun complained. Naruto, reprimand him. What am I? His mother? He asked. Would you let something like this happen during the war? No, I wouldn't, he admitted. Eric, put the book away and keep watch. I am keeping watch, Eric replied, sounding mildly offended. I am reading on my Omnitool and the screen is see-through. I can read and watch at the same time. He didn't have a comeback to that, so instead he just said, alright, continue on. Naruto, said Sun in chastisement. What? He has a point. Not wanting to get into an argument about it, because he knew it would be both pointless and stupid, he turned his attention to Miranda and Grunt. You guys go find the stuff. I'll keep watch. You always keep watch, Grunt remarked. I don't know how to pull out the information out of the computers, so it's a little pointless to try. He walked back out and stood guard out in the corridor. A good thing about the labs for them was that they only had the one door, which made guarding duty much easier to handle. Unfortunately, it was also much more boring. Naruto knew that every time he took it on and was irritated every time. It honestly seemed like that time would slow down whenever he took guard duty. He took his spot by the door and scanned the corridor. It didn't take him long to get bored and he declared it loudly inside his head. Well, what are you going to do about it? Read a book? Sun asked him when he was done declaring. No. I don't have any books on me. That was probably something he should look into the next time he was on guard duty. You could just download them into your Omnitool, Komiai suggested. He shouldn't do that at all, the Yambi shouted. I can't believe you would even suggest that. He's right, it's boring. You want boring, Gyuki joined the conversation. Boring is good. Boring means nothing is coming to kill you. It was at that moment Naruto saw a trio of tribal personnel coming down the corridor from the left. They saw him too and the Turian shouted, There! There he is, you had to say to it. He told Gyuki as he crouched down and started shooting at the trio. Guys, we've got company. He shouted through the door. He heard no reply. Guys. He shouted again. But there was still nothing. Focus on the bad guys in front of you, Naruto, Saiken told him. He did as he was told. They were firing just as much as he was, but his crouched position and his shields protected him. His lowered position gave him a clearer aim at their legs, a position he gladly took advantage of. As far as he could tell, shields lasted shorter in other areas, especially if he used right-on bullets. His left gun was filled with such bullets. He led with that, shooting at the leg that was stepping forward. It took a couple of shots, but the Turian fell down with a cry of pain. Gah! Fuck! He screamed. Get up! The Solarian told him. He and the Asari stopped to help back onto his feet, turning their backs. That was a mistake they shouldn't have made. They had been barely 10 feet away from Naruto, and he took advantage of it. He charged down the corridor, falling into a slide and knocking the other two down to the ground as he went past. The Turian and the Solarian he managed to take care of a gunshot per. He took a second to aim at the Asari and it allowed her to sit up, her hand already reaching for the spare pistol. She aimed and fired. He rolled out of the way and he came out of it by hopping up onto his feet into a squat, which she did too. They stood up at the same time as well. Okay, time to switch to close quarters, he thought. He dropped his guns and charged her, which she mirrored. She made the first attack, throwing a punch right at his face. He flowed past it and got her in the stomach with a hard palm thrust. She fell back against the wall but pushed off just as soon as she hit. She came back with a kick that was probably intended to take his head off, but he leaned back and she missed. As the foot passed, he grabbed and held it in place before delivering a hard elbow to her shin he was sure would break the bones. It probably would have, if she hadn't been wearing armor there. All he got for his trouble was a pain stinging his elbow. Ow! The Ancestry bent her leg and snapped it forward, kicking him into the wall. His back reported that it was hurting, but it was a muffled pain. The armor was good for something after all. She came at him swinging. He tilted his head and the punch hit the wall with a resounding crack. Awah! She breathed out in pain, holding the hand. He pushed off the wall and rammed his shoulder into her stomach. He kept pushing her back and back, slamming her right into the wall. He did it 3 more times, pushing harder each time against the wall. She tried to fight back, but his grip on her was solid and she could not find one. She finally stopped struggling against him, and he stepped away. She was barely standing on her feet, but she kept her arms ready to fight and her gaze was on him. She's tough, he conceded. She's on her last leg, Kurama told him. End it. She took a step at him and swung wildly. He grabbed hold of her hand, twisting it and sending her to the ground. He twisted even further, breaking the bone with a clear and loud snap. He let go of the hand and she pulled it in for a brief moment. But like before, that moment cost her. In that moment, he reached out, grabbed her by the head, and twisted her neck hard. Her bones snapped, and she fell to the ground, dead. He went back over to where he dropped his guns and picked them up again, holstering them. He walked back over to the door. How we doing, guys? He called through the door but received no answer. Guys? He called out. It was only then he noticed that the lock on the door was red, not green. Guys! He shouted, banging on the door. What's going on in there, Commander? Said Jacob through the calm. Jacob, what is it? I'm a little busy here. There's been a gas released into the lab. It came with an automatic command that locked the doors, keeping them trapped in there. They're dying in there. His heart clenched at those words. This was a scenario he was familiar, seeing people die when there was nothing he could do about it. The only difference between then and now was the fact that he couldn't see them. Get it open. Get it open right now. We're trying, Zaid told him. Whoever did the coding on this knew what the fuck they were doing. It's going to take time. They don't have time, asshole. Ruko shouted, her voice holding a faint note of panic. Get it open now. I'm working on it. Naruto felt helpless, like there was nothing he could do. He could fight off any enemies that came his way no matter what condition his body was in. He could make them all stop in their tracks with a single look from him, but put a technologically locked door in front of him, and there was nothing he could do. He wanted to bang on the door some more, but it wouldn't have done anything. I can't just stand here and do nothing. He mentally screamed, his eyes searching for something, anything, that could help him open the door. But all he could see was the door, the corridor, the dead bodies nearby, and himself. When he looked at himself, he looked at his hands. An idea came to him, something he hadn't really tried since he woke up. Kurama took one look at the idea forming in his mind and asked, Are you sure? Do you have any better ideas? He asked back, Cut your losses and run? I will never do that. He shouted, angry that the furball would even dare suggest such a thing right to his face. Just making sure, the fox said calmly. He stretched out his right hand and began channeling his chakra into the palm. First, he spun it every which way he possibly could. Then he powered it up, feeding more chakra into it. That was when the pain started. It was a dull roar of pain to begin with, like embers beginning to smoke again. He ignored it and kept on creating the jutsu. The embers caught afire, and the dullness became all too live. He stifled a groaning sound when it washed over his body. Compared to the other times he had felt the pain, this was nothing. This was nothing compared to what he had been through over the years. He could stand it. He would stand it. Bring it together, he told himself through the pain, clenching his teeth as he finished the jutsu. It worked like a charm. For the first time since he woke up, he held his father's jutsu in his hand. Nice going, Kurama told him. He didn't say anything in reply, still staring at it. The pain was still there, but now it seemed to fade away. No time to contemplate it or admire it. He had to get them out of there. Miranda, Guris, get clear of the door. He shouted through it. He lifted up the jutsu and slammed it into the door. Rasengan! The door churned and screeched against the sphere, filling the corridor with the noise. It held for 2 seconds before throwing in the towel by breaking off its seams and flying through the lab at full speed. Anything caught in the way was smashed and or wrecked, adding more noise to it all. Luckily, Miranda and Gurus weren't one of those things to be hit. They were down on the ground beside the door. It made it easy for Naruto to go in and get them before. "Guys?" he said to them both, placing them against the wall outside in the corridor. "Guys, are you alright? Just give us a second," Gurus coughed as he got his breath back. "Commander, the gas," Miranda said with the same kind of cough. "It's fine." "You're out of it," he told her. "No, it's coming out." She managed to wheeze out. He turned his head back to look at the door. He hadn't realized that the gas, pasty purplish pale in color, was creeping its way out of the lab. In this kind of situation, one might have normally closed the door to stop it. But since he had blown the door across the room, he couldn't do that. "And while you're staring at it all, the gas is still leaking out," Kurama pointed out to him. "Get a move on already." He heard the silent rebuke in those words and stepped inside the lab. "Jacob, I got Miranda and Gurus out, but the gas is leaking out of the lab," he said to the other team through the comm. "How are things coming?" "We're still working on it," Jacob answered him. "Is there anything I can do on this end?" Maybe if he did something, it would help end this faster. "Hang on, how is the gas leaking out of the lab?" Zaid demanded. "I blew the door off the hinges," he answered, too busy to be embarrassed by his actions. "Is there anything I can do?" "Stand there and look pretty." "Actually, there is something you can possibly do," Jacob said. "There's a chance that you can stop the gas from that side." He saw something wrong with that plan right away. "I'm not a technical person, Jacob. I'll walk you through it. Get to the computer." He did as he was bidden, walking through the gas. His helmet was filtering it out so he could breathe safely. The gas was become denser as he made his way through the lab, hissing its way from somewhere in the back. He almost didn't see the computer until he rammed his knee into the desk. He bit down on the yelp coming out of his mouth and turned his attention to it. "Alright, I found one of the computers. Is it on?" "I think so." It was a little hard to see in the fog, but it looked like it was on. "Good. Find the keyboard and try typing in deactivate." "It cannot be that easy," Kurama objected. "You got a better idea?" Sun asked. "I don't," Naruto said, reaching forward to the keyboard. He typed in the command and hit the enter button. Error. The computer buzzed, glaring red. "See, Jacob, it didn't work. Be more specific. Try typing in deactivate gas protocol." He did that. This time, he got green instead of red and the computer voice saying deactivation in progress. The hissing stopped, but the pale purple gas was still all around him. "Alright, the gas stopped, but it's still in here." "We got that," Zaid told him. He didn't know what they did, but the gas started flowing backwards to the origin point. It was a slow thing, but he could see it happening. "Nice work," he replied. "Are the others okay?" Ruko asked through the comm. "They're fine, Ruko. I got them out in time." "Good." It was the only thing she said, but even though it was, he knew what it meant. Beneath his helmet, he smiled a little bit. As he turned to walk out of the lab, he saw an OSD lying on the table. He stopped and looked at it. "I wonder." It was better to be safe than sorry. He picked it up and plugged it into his Omni tool. It only took a quick look to confirm what he had thought. He took it out and put it away safely. Then he walked out to check on his teammates. "Are you guys okay?" he asked Miranda and Gurus again. "Yeah, we're fine," Gurus replied, sounding better than before. "What's more, we got the information we've been looking for. Codex entry, Humanity and the Systems Alliance, the reforging." The aftermath of the Fourth Shinobi World War left the elemental countries in a worse position than before. A large portion of the lands, almost 60%, were no longer held by their former lords. Rather, they had been taken control by men that had followed Obito Uchiha, and now held power over their new territories. Once the war had ended, chaos quickly followed. With Obito gone and not able to keep the various criminals, gangs, and everyone in between, they quickly prepared for a fight. They expected to have the Shinobi Alliance come down upon them, but nothing happened right away. There was no attack of any kind on them for 3 months, which is known now as the calm before the storm. As it happens, the criminal leaders were so focused on consolidating their powers and watching out for threats, their paranoia began to play on them. Their attentions turned on each other, thinking that they would attack each other first, and chose to take the preemptive measure. The fighting turned bloody in a matter of weeks, and any semblance of order or control in their territories promptly drowned in a tide of their own blood. That had been the moment the Shinobi Alliance had waited for and struck. In 2 weeks, they recovered 3/4 of the land lost. The remaining quarter took much longer since the leaders of those quarters saw the dangers and burrowed in. It was enough to slow down the momentum of the alliance, and while they were able to publicly declare that the lands had been recovered, it took up to a year to smoke the remaining leaders and their groups. The reforging is considered to be a minor piece of history by most, but the elemental countries consider it to be a time just as pivotal as the war preceding it. Shikamaru Nara of Konohagakure, a veteran of the Fourth Shinobi World War, the reforging, and later the War of the Three Flags, best described the time by saying fighting together during a war was easy. What came next was the troublesome part: how to work together during peace.